Chapter 200. Ha, ha ha ha, all of this is due to the assistance of all the officials. Zhu Qiyu happily distributed the credit to the other officials. For a moment, it attracted endless sounds of gratitude from the officials. However, not all of the officials were shouting that the emperor was the true son of heaven. For example, the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, had always maintained a clear mind. As an old official of several dynasties, he was very clear that the emperor was only the head of the dragons. Otherwise, the court would not be able to be unified and clear. As for who would be the head, it all depended on luck and identity. Just like when Zhu Qizhen was the emperor, didn't these officials also shout that the emperor was wise and that the emperor was the true son of heaven? But in reality, after losing the battle, everyone instantly shut their mouths. Now, they began to praise Zhu Qiyu again. It was really unknown how thick the skin of these people was. However, in the court, there were some things that had to be done. If you were too independent, you would only be isolated by the other officials. In that case, it would really be difficult to do anything. However, even if they wanted to flatter, shouldn't they do it more gently? Zhu Qiyu had been nervously waiting in the imperial palace. What did the victory of this battle have to do with him? He was somewhat displeased, or perhaps it was because of the unfairness of his grandson-in-law. When everyone was shouting that the emperor was wise and long live the emperor, Hu Shao suddenly said, "Generals, where is the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage? Why is he not here? Did he leave the city to chase the enemy or was he injured in the battle?" Finally, someone mentioned Yang Chendong. The originally noisy scene instantly quieted down. Hu Zhao's words were like a bright slap to the face, causing many of the officials' faces to turn red. The true hero of this battle should be Yang Chendong, without a doubt. However, so much time had passed, yet no one thought of him. This was truly a bit too much. When these words came out, Zhu Qiyu's face also turned red. He clearly knew that his performance just now was a bit too much. If it wasn't for Yang Chendong, it would have been difficult to achieve such a great victory. After he knew of the great victory, he didn't think of the person with the greatest merit and instead received the congratulations of the officials. This was truly a bit too much. Fortunately, Hu Shao gave a timely reminder. He also asked, "That's right, why is the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage not here? Why don't we see him?" Zhu Qiyu pretended to be anxious for the officials to see. This immediately attracted many of the officials' nods. They all seemed to be praising the emperor's actions towards the meritorious officials, but in reality, only they knew what was going on. Yang Guang and Sun Chendong, the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage. After all, without this person, there wouldn't be today's victory, and they wouldn't have had the chance to be in the limelight. However, it seemed to be a little late for the emperor to ask about it now. No matter how, the emperor of loyalty, Zhu Guang. Now that he was asked, the two immediately knelt on the ground and replied, "Your Majesty, the loyal Marquis wasn't injured. He only said he was tired and went back to rest." Tired? Resting? Zhu Qiyu was confused by this answer. He stood there with a face full of suspicion. Yes, he is indeed tired. The truth is like this. Sun Chendong narrated what happened on the battlefield. From Yang Chendong scolding Xi Ning for being unfaithful, unfilial, heartless, and unjust, he pointed out and Xi Ning died. After that, he pointed out that Xi Ning fell off his horse and died, causing the Walla army to lose morale. Everyone listened to Sun Chendong's narration as if they were listening to a heavenly book. For a moment, everyone's faces tightened. They didn't expect the young Marquis to have such ability. While everyone was still digesting Sun Chendong's words, Minister of War Yi Ming spoke first. "Commander Sun, do you know what you just said? The person standing in front of you is the Emperor, the Son of Heaven. How can you speak without thinking? This subject is not speaking nonsense. What I said is the truth. If you don't believe me, you can ask Commander Yang and all the soldiers who participated in the battle. Sun Chendong heard Yi Ming accuse him of lying and immediately defended himself. A small commander, who was only a 6th-grade official, dared to contradict a 2nd-grade minister of war. This naturally made Yi Ming's face turn ugly. He secretly made a note of this person and thought that if he had the chance, he would definitely teach him a lesson. His gaze fell on Yang Guang. Vice Commander Yang, tell me, what is the truth? Of course, you don't have to be afraid of other people's threats. Just tell the truth. With this minister here, no one will dare to make things difficult for you. Yi Ming said this not to support Yang Chendong, but to guide him to refute Sun Chendong and deny the fact that the greatest contributor in this battle was Yang Chendong. If a minister of war were to question a vice commander, the latter would be scared to the point of wetting his pants. However, Yang Guang, who had just experienced a battle, was full of admiration for Yang Chendong. How could he dare to speak ill of him? He immediately kowtowed to the ground. This general does not dare to speak nonsense. What Commander Sun said is the truth. Wow! As soon as Yang Guang's words fell, the crowd once again exclaimed in surprise. Since the two generals had said the same thing, it seemed that this matter was true. However, how could Yang Chendong kill anyone he pointed at? Could it be that he had some kind of sorcery? Yi Ming stood there with an ugly expression. The two of them were his subordinates in name, but now they dared to refute him in public. It was truly embarrassing. Fortunately, no one's attention was on him, so he didn't lose too much face. After hearing Sun Chendong and Yang Guang's explanation, the officials finally understood why the loyal Marquis was tired and needed a good rest. It was probably because the sorcery he used was too tiring. Of course, some people who knew immediately thought of the mercenaries who had the most advanced firearms. These people only knew that the mercenaries' firearms were very advanced. As for how advanced they were, they didn't know. After hearing what happened on the battlefield today, they had a new view of the matter. Zhu Qiyu was naturally one of the people who knew. But the more it was like this, the more worried he was. This advanced firearm could easily take a person's life from 1,000 meters away. If that was the case, didn't it mean that if one day they wanted to deal with him, he would also have nowhere to hide? As soon as this thought appeared, it was like a large stone pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. He even felt a little restless. As the emperor, the thing he was most worried about was that he couldn't control the situation. Then he wouldn't be able to decide the life and death of others. At this moment, the joy of winning the battle was no longer as strong. Instead, it was replaced with a worried expression. Zhu Qiyu left first, accompanied by head eunuch Jining. Without the emperor, the officials also lost the mood to celebrate. One by one, they turned and returned to their own residences. With today's victory, they could finally go back and have a good night's sleep. In the imperial palace, Zhu Qiyu walked in front with a heavy heart. Behind him, Jining followed step by step. It wasn't until they entered the rear courtyard of the imperial palace and there was no one around that he quickened his pace. He was half a step behind the emperor when he said, "Your Majesty, are you worried about the Marquis of Loyalty?" "Yes." Without anyone else around, Zhu Qiyu finally admitted, "The mercenaries' firearms are too advanced. The Marquis of Loyalty has such a good relationship with them." If they, Zhu Qiyu didn't finish his sentence, but he believed that Jining would understand. In a sense, they were grasshoppers on the same rope. Only when his throne was secure could Jining bask in his glory and hold power. How could Jining not understand this logic? With Zhu Qiyu around, he was the eunuch Jin that everyone admired. Without this emperor, he would probably die without a burial ground. Since the emperor had worries and hidden dangers, he had to think of a way to deal with them. This subject understands. How about this? I will immediately make a trip to the Immortal abode and have a chat with the Marquis of Loyalty. At the same time, I will see if there is an opportunity to get in touch with the general of the mercenaries and reach some kind of agreement with them. Jining reported his thoughts to the emperor. Good. Let's work on both sides. In any case, there must be a result. We will not allow anyone who threatens our safety to exist. Zhu Qiyu nodded lightly, his voice carrying a hint of dignity. Immortal abode. When Yang Chendong returned, he had gained a new title, War God. This was probably what it meant to become a god in a single battle. With just a few pointers, he had created his own legend. According to reliable investigations, not a single member of the Great Ming Dynasty's army had died in this battle. Only a dozen or so people had been injured in the pursuit because they had been too excited. The achievement of repelling 10,000 enemies with 0 casualties was worthy of this title. This was the benefit of having a weapon that transcended time. It wasn't that the Walla was useless, but rather that the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad's marksmanship was too miraculous. In the Immortal Abode study, Yang Chendong was listening to the report of the Deputy Chief of the Security Bureau, Yang San, with his eyes closed. Summarizing a battle after a battle was an excellent tradition. Even Yang Chendong was no exception. Before this battle, he had already made plans for the worst-case scenario. That was, the Walla cavalry wouldn't stop and would directly attack. If that were the case, the 4 companies of Cold Vanguard lying in ambush outside the Victory Gate would all attack. If that were the case, no one could guarantee that the Cold Vanguard wouldn't suffer any losses in the chaotic battle. After all, their greatest shortcoming was their lack of numbers. If they really did encounter enemies who didn't fear death, how many people could they kill with 400 guns? Fortunately, the Victory Gate had been opened wide, allowing Wang Zhan to fantasize about such a smooth battle. You can't rely on luck in war. This must be conveyed to Commander Ling Song, as well as to the ears of every Cold Vanguard soldier. Yang Chendong heard from Yang Ben that some of the Cold Vanguard soldiers had different opinions about only lying in ambush and not fighting head-on. After saying that the young master was being too careful, his expression became extremely serious. Chapter 201. Yang Chendong didn't blame them for having such thoughts and complaints. After all, they wielded the most advanced weapons in the world and had undergone the strictest training. However, they couldn't afford to be arrogant. Otherwise, they would suffer a setback sooner or later. Since Ling Feng had the intention to underestimate the enemy, they had to correct the situation. Seeing how serious Yang Chendong was, Yang San hurriedly took out a notebook and wrote everything down. He couldn't help but nod his head. This subordinate will immediately go to the courtyard to let everyone know about this and let them know that young master cares about them. At the same time, inform them that the Walla's vanguard has been defeated, but Yes Hen won't let it go so easily. There will be at least one more battle. Tell them to be prepared. Yang Chendong nodded his head in satisfaction. Then, he thought of the matter in the imperial court and asked, right, after this battle, what are the thoughts of His Majesty and the officials? Has there been any controversy in the imperial court? Young master, this subordinate was just about to report this matter. I just received news from Lord Su Yozhen that not long after you gave the order to open the city gates, the imperial court learned of this matter. After our investigation, we found that it was probably Commander Sun Tong who sent someone to report this news. Because of this, there are people who are slandering the young master, saying that you are colluding with the Walla. The new Minister of War, Yiming, is the main culprit. The Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, have spoken up in support of this matter. It was only after Minister Hu Mang stepped in that these rumors were suppressed. Do you think we should do something in private? The situation in the capital isn't stable at the moment, so it's normal for a few people to be missing. Yang San reported while carefully looking at Yang Chendong. He had already made his intentions clear. Since there were people who wanted to deal with the young master, it would be better to strike first and get rid of him. No. Yang Chendong quickly shook his head upon hearing Yang San's thoughts. The Great Ming Dynasty's problems don't completely originate from the imperial court. These people are just representatives of Confucianism. Even if all the ministers in the court are arrested, there will still be people who will be re-elected. This is simply a problem with the system. There is no end to killing people. Yang Qindong was very clear in his heart. Looking at the history of China, ever since the Han Dynasty revered only Confucianism, the disciples of the Confucian sect were the privileged class, high and mighty. Over the years, they had become accustomed to it. They monopolized education and the officialdom. They were corrupt, conservative, and stubborn. However, they were so powerful that even the emperor had to give face to them. Often, they would support things that were beneficial to them and oppose things that were not. Yang Qindong's appearance was a threat to them. It was just that the fight had not reached the root of the problem yet, so it had not escalated to the extreme. This was also one of the important reasons why Yang Qindong only developed in the business world. Yang Bao's distribution, Immortal Abode and Sky Beyond Heaven's hot sales, plus the Yang family's bank that was going to be established soon, gave people the feeling that they were thinking of ways to earn money. In the eyes of the Confucians, they were just stained with the stench of money and could not be brought to the table. In truth, all of this was Yang Qindong's intention. He did not come into contact with other industries in order to avoid direct confrontation with the Confucian faction. What he needed to do was slowly infiltrate. Once he had enough influence, some things would naturally come naturally. But before that, not even the emperor could touch this faction, and those who angered him would not have a good end. Why would he want to provoke them? Yi Ming and the others had only tried to undermine him because they did not want to see him gain too much power and merit. In the end, it was still jealousy at work. This sort of mentality was of no consequence to the overall situation, so there was no need to care too much about it. On the contrary, if he killed them now, anyone who wasn't a fool would be able to see that he was the culprit. That would be tantamount to declaring war on the Confucian sect. He wouldn't do such a thankless thing. Yang Qindong had vetoed the decision to attack Yi Ming and the others, so Yang San knew that the time was not right. He immediately expressed that he would only pay attention to these people in the future, but would not take any action. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with Yang San's timely declaration. Very good. The staff of the Security Bureau have worked hard. How about this, when you go out, go to the Chief of Tiger's Mane and get 1 million taels of silver to reward your brothers. Young master, there is still enough silver. Yang San waved his hand, wanting to refuse. In fact, the Security Bureau had never lacked silver. All of this was because Yang Qindong had said that if they wanted to establish an excellent intelligence system, they had to be willing to spend silver. Thus, a steady stream of silver flowed into the Security Bureau. With enough silver, it was much easier to do things with half the effort. Just this treatment alone had attracted the envy and jealousy of many people in the Yang family. However, this matter was requested by Yang Qindong, so even if others had some thoughts, they did not dare to say anything publicly. The Security Bureau was not in the eyes of some of the senior officers of the Yang Consortium's new army, but Yang Qindong's weight and authority were not to be questioned. All right, it's settled then. Go and do your work. Without giving Yang Ben a chance to refuse, Yang Qindong waved his hand and gestured for him to leave. Yang San was touched. He knew that the young master felt sorry for his brothers in the Security Bureau. After all, the members of the Security Bureau were sometimes like mice that could not see the sun. Most of them lived in the dark. In order to keep their identities secret, they could not contact their families, get married, and have children. They had to give up all their youth. Sometimes, in order to obtain important information, they had to work hard for a few months, half a year, or even longer. Giving more silver was one of Yang Qindong's ways of compensating them. Yang San suddenly raised his right hand and gave a standard military salute before leaving the study. Not long after, Tiger's Mane strode in. There were not many people who could come to Yang Qindong's side without reporting. Other than Hu Yen and the other girls, only Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei had such qualifications. Young master, eunuch Jin Ing is here. He said he brought a new edict from His Majesty. As soon as Tiger's Mane entered the room and saw Yang Chendong leaning against the chair with his eyes closed, he said carefully. Yang Chendong, whose eyes were still closed, acted as if he did not hear Tiger's Mane's words. He asked, "Has the 1,000,000 taels of silver been sent to the Security Bureau?" "Yes, it's been sent. It's the remuneration that His Majesty gave to Ling Feng." "That's good. Arrange a side hall. I'll go see Jin Ing." Yang Chendong slowly opened his eyes. After he got up and stretched, his eyes shone with a dazzling luster again. At this moment, Jin Ing had come to see him. Even if he used his toes to think, he would know why. It seemed that Zhu Qiyu was not confident. Zhu Qiyu was indeed not confident. On one hand, he wanted to use the mercenaries to defeat Walla's great enemy. On the other hand, he was worried that the mercenaries would threaten his safety after their victory. To guard against people and to use people at the same time. Under such contradictory psychology, Jin Ing had come. In the side hall, Yang Chendong and Jin Ing met. After greeting each other, they sat down in their respective seats. Eunuch Jin first praised the loyal Marquis's performance today and even called him a military god. Both the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards had their own intelligence agencies. Because they had been established for a long time, their strength could not be underestimated. For example, the fact that Yang Chendong was called a military god could not be hidden from Jin Ying's eyes and ears. Eunuch Jin must be joking. "It's all thanks to His Majesty's good fortune," Yang Chendong said modestly with a smile. This battle was won by relying on the advanced firearms of the mercenaries. His Majesty is just someone who spent money. Jin Ing chuckled, but as he spoke, he pointed out the crux of the problem. This eunuch was clear about everything. "You're just a military god who used advanced firearms. It can't be taken seriously. Moreover, even if the mercenaries were hired, the emperor would be the one paying for it. Your contribution would be even less." Yes, Eunuch Jin's words are very true. Yang Chendong's expression did not change. He did not even have the intention to deny it. For this matter, Zhu Qiyu had spent 10,000,000 taels of silver. Although half of it had been in the form of property, it was still wealth. The fact that Yang Chendong had so easily admitted it made Jin Ing feel like he had punched cotton, and his complexion turned rather nasty. When he had come, he had already prepared himself for Yang Chendong to ask for a reward. He had even prepared the words of reprimand so that he could use this opportunity to suppress this Marquis of loyalty and valor. But Wang Chendong had no intention of asking for a reward, so what could he do? He couldn't just go and reprimand a meritorious subject without a word. If he did that, he would be going too far. After all, the main force of the Walla had yet to arrive at the capital. If he got rid of the donkey after it had left the millstone and he couldn't deal with the mercenaries, wouldn't the capital be in danger? He could not bear such a heavy responsibility. Yang Chendong's low profile and modesty had ruined Jin Ying's plans. But Jin Ing had followed several emperors, so he was able to react quickly. He looked at Yang Chendong and said, "Marquis of loyalty and valor, His Majesty is extremely satisfied with the performance of the mercenaries in this battle. He ordered this duke to reward the mercenaries no matter what. The imperial kitchen has prepared a lot of food for this occasion. Marquis Yang, why don't you tell them so that they can make things easier for you? At the very least, His Majesty should act as a host." Listening to Jin Ying's words, Wang Chendong knew that Jin Ing still wanted to go around him and get in touch with the mercenaries. Since this was the case and they had prepared delicious food, how could he not take advantage of this opportunity? If he could save on the Immortal Abode's food, why not? He smiled and said, "All right, since it's His Majesty's wish, this Marquis will send someone to accompany Jin Gonggong to the mercenary camp's courtyard." Chapter 202. Yang Chendong was so cooperative. Not only did he agree, but he also did not go personally. This greatly exceeded Jin Ying's expectations. He had originally thought that even if he agreed, he would go along and reap the benefits. Of course, Yang Chendong would not go with them. This was what Jin Ying wanted to see. He did not stand on ceremony. In that case, I'll have to trouble you, Duke of Loyalty. No problem, no problem. Seeing that Jin Ying did not invite him to go with them, Yang Chendong looked at him with annoyance. He could even imagine that once Zhu Qiyu really contacted the mercenaries, she would immediately kick him out. She might even find a crime to confiscate his family property. This was the scheming of an emperor. Sometimes, the emperor would turn hostile and refuse to acknowledge the other party's kindness. However, no matter how much Zhu Qiyu calculated, he would never have thought that the real mastermind behind the mercenaries was Yang Chendong. His methods would be useless in the end. In fact, it was not just Zhu Qiyu. None of the old foxes in the imperial court would have thought that the mercenaries, who had such advanced firearms, would have anything to do with a young man who was not even 20 years old. It was precisely because no one could guess that Yang Chendong did not cause everyone to boycott him in advance. Jin Ying left happily. Tiger's Mane followed Yang Chendong's orders and accompanied him to the courtyard of the mercenaries' barracks. Yang Chendong had mentioned this when he met with Commander Leng Song and the others yesterday. Once they won the battle and displayed their great strength, the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty would certainly think of a way to contact them and deepen their relationship. This was something that would be difficult to avoid. Instead of thinking of all sorts of ways and excuses to avoid it, it was better to meet them openly. In any case, there would be no promises. On the contrary, there would be some benefits. Why not? Jin Ying did not know about this. He only knew that if he had the chance to meet with the mercenaries alone, as long as he could establish a good relationship with them and make them work for him, it would infinitely increase his authority. In this way, even in front of the emperor, Zhu Qiyu, he would be able to speak with more confidence. Led by Tiger's Man, Jin Ying brought a group of embroidered uniform guards and a young eunuch from the palace to the courtyard of the mercenaries' military camp. With Yang Chendong's previous instructions, the group naturally entered without a hitch. Here, Jin Ying met the leader of the mercenaries for the first time, Leng Song, whom the soldiers addressed as commander. Although she didn't know what the commander's official title was, seeing how respectful the others were towards Leng Song, Jin Ying's intuition told her that there would only be benefits and no harm in getting closer to this person. Immediately, his face bloomed like a flower as he quickly stepped forward and took the initiative to greet Leng Song. Aya, Commander Leng is indeed a man of striking appearance. You are young and promising. You truly make me envious. As soon as he arrived in front of Leng Song, he listened to everything that was good. Leng Song, who had long been prepared and had a certain understanding of eunuchs, said with a straight face, "Are you the leader of the eunuchs by the great Ming Emperor's side? Very good, since the items have been delivered, you may leave." Leng Song's expression was so resolute and cold that Jin Ying's expression changed after hearing it. What kind of person was he? He was Zhu Qiyu's favorite. To put it bluntly, if he didn't like anyone now, he only needed to say a word in front of Dai Zong. Even if that person didn't die, they would lose a layer of skin. Other people couldn't wait to curry favor with him. Who would dare to speak to him in such a tone? However, Leng Song had done so, and yet he still didn't have the slightest bit of temper. He didn't dare to show Leng Song any displeasure, and he didn't even dare to say a single harsh word. This made Jin Ying's heart tighten. However, he was someone who was used to being a eunuch. He had suffered many grievances, so the speed at which he stabilized his state of mind was still very fast. After adjusting his state of mind, he looked at Leng Song and said with the same smile, "Commander Leng, I am here on behalf of the great Ming Emperor to thank you all. Sending these foods is merely a small token of our sincerity." My emperor's intention is for me to come and see if there is anything lacking here. If you have any requests, feel free to ask. Jining appeared to be very heroic. As long as they could rope in mercenaries, they felt that paying a certain price was necessary and worth it. Jining even had a bold idea, and that was to use mercenaries to deal with Zhu Qianxia's sect and complete the great matter of the Great Ming Dynasty's unification. Leng Song silently looked at Jining. The sixth young master was truly a godly person. 2 days ago, he had already guessed that after winning the battle, Zhu Qianxia's sect would spend money to rope him in. Wasn't this happening now? Since such a good thing had been delivered to him, how could he not accept it? Leng Song, who had been very cold, suddenly smiled. In Jining's eyes, this smile was like 100 flowers blooming. It actually made him feel as if his heart was bursting with joy. Eunuch Jin is too polite. Since this is the case, how much can the great Ming Emperor give us if we lack copper and iron? He actually made a request. Jining was overjoyed. He knew that this was very likely a way to strengthen the bond between him and the mercenaries. Not to mention copper and iron, as long as the Great Ming Dynasty had it, they probably wouldn't be stingy in the slightest. Well said, well said. The mercenaries have helped us defend against foreign enemies, so you are our best friends. Whatever you need, we will find a way to satisfy you. Since Jining had agreed so readily, Leng Song naturally had to express his gratitude. He laughed heartily and invited the other party into the depths of the barracks. On the surface, the relationship between the two sides seemed to be quickly warming up. Jining and Leng Song took this opportunity to get to know each other better, and reached a certain consensus. When he left, Jining's face was filled with excitement, as if an old tree had just bloomed. When the other junior eunuchs saw this, they felt an inexplicable sense of fear. They seemed to have seen eunuch Jining regain his manly vigor. He was probably going to find them at any time to have some fun. There were many times when the world of eunuchs was unknown to outsiders, and they couldn't understand it. Perverted people often had many perverted methods, and these methods were often used to make senior eunuchs happy, while the junior eunuchs had nothing left to live for. Not long after Jining left, an inconspicuous man dressed as a woodcutter walked out from the rear courtyard of the barracks, heading straight for the Immortal abode. No one knew that this inconspicuous man was a secret agent from the security bureau. He wanted to report the details of Leng Song and Jining's conversation to the sixth young master. In the palace, Jining was delighted to see Zhu Qiyu. She then truthfully reported to Zhu Qiyu what she had discussed with Commander Leng. Your Majesty, this subject has already found out that the headquarters of the mercenaries are at sea, on a large ship. They don't have a fixed residence, and will go wherever they are needed. Most of the mercenaries are from the Great Ming Dynasty, but because they can't survive under the harsh governance of the local officials, they have no choice but to take the risk and seek a living at sea. Jining proudly told Zhu Qiyu everything she knew about the mercenaries. Those corrupt officials. When Zhu Qiyu heard this, his face was filled with anger. For such talented people to be chased out of the country, those local officials were the sinners of the country. Yes, corrupt officials should be killed. But if it weren't for their actions, these people would only be decent soldiers at best. Without advanced firearms, they would be no different from the ordinary soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty. Through her understanding of Zhu Qiyu over the past few days, Jining had more or less seen through him. This emperor was the type who had great ambitions. He truly wanted to become a famous ruler and strengthen the Great Ming Dynasty. However, some things couldn't be changed by one's will. If he truly wanted to revive the Great Ming Dynasty, there were still too many things that needed to be done. How to strengthen the Great Ming Dynasty was a grand goal to begin with. It was difficult to explain in a short amount of time. Jining wanted to talk about the problem at hand, so Gu Qing continued, Your Majesty, it's because of the advanced firearms that these mercenaries possess undefeatable battle prowess. From chatting with Commander Leng Song, this subject found out that it was because the loyal marquis had unintentionally made a business deal with them that he gained their basic trust. For example, most of the goods sold in heavens beyond heaven were provided by the mercenaries. After Yang Chendong obtained them, he sold them at a high price to the merchants and commoners of the great Ming dynasty. Speaking of which, he's the blood-sucking one of the most corrupt officials. That's right. Although the loyal marquis is young, his ambitions aren't small. This person isn't easy to get along with. If there's an opportunity in the future, we have to think of a way to get rid of him. Zhu Qiyu nodded in agreement. Ever since he ascended the throne, Yang Chendong had been demanding things from him. He didn't behave like a subject should. It was precisely because Yang Chendong protected his imperial brother, Zhu Qizhan, that the great Ming dynasty was suddenly split into two halves. Although he did contribute to the defense of the capital this time, how much money did he get from the great Ming dynasty's treasury and how much imperial property? A subject who profited from the country's war was truly infuriating and deserved to be killed. If it weren't for the fact that the defense of the capital was imminent, in a fit of anger, he might have already issued a decree to kill Yang Chendong. Seeing that the emperor was full of loathing for the loyal marquis, Jiningnai felt a burst of joy in his heart. This was exactly what he wanted. Yang Chendong's wealth and influence were simply too tempting. If he could get rid of this person, the profits would definitely not be small. Most importantly, if he got rid of this person, he would be able to privately contact the mercenaries and become the link and bridge between them and the great Ming dynasty's commerce. At that time, would he still have to worry about a steady flow of money? Yes, Your Majesty is right. However, these are all trivial matters at the moment. How to maintain a close relationship with the mercenaries is the most important thing. This subject thinks like this. First, we need to get closer to each other so that they won't have any ideas about us. Second, we need to make them work for us. With their support and assistance, it won't be difficult to drive away Walla or defeating Zong. We can even buy a large number of advanced firearms from them. It won't be impossible for us to expand our territory and strengthen our great Ming. Chapter 203. Zhu Qiyu's blood surged when he heard Jin Ying's words. Wasn't this person talking about his life goal? When he heard that he could buy a large amount of advanced firearms from the mercenaries, he became even more excited. Beloved official, are they really willing to sell such advanced firearms to us? Zhu Qiyu couldn't be blamed for asking this question. The mercenaries' strength lay in their advanced firearms. If everyone used the same level of weapons, the great Ming dynasty, which had sufficient soldiers, could destroy the mercenaries in minutes. Selling one's foundation to others was a short-sighted action. Zhu Qiyu didn't think that this matter was very feasible. It's possible. Your Majesty, to be honest, this subject also thought that it was impossible. However, when Commander Ling mentioned that he needed a large amount of copper and iron, this subject casually mentioned that Your Majesty was very interested in the advanced firearms in their hands. Unexpectedly, Commander Ling agreed on the spot that as long as we could provide them with the materials they needed, he would personally gift us an advanced firearm as a tribute to Your Majesty. As for the need for more firearms, he would need to return to the sea and report to his leader before he could make a decision. When Jining said this, he was eloquent and eloquent. From the looks of it, he was clearly trying to show off his achievements. Is that really possible? That's great. This way, we can give them as much copper and iron as they need, as long as we have them in our national treasury. Although we can only get one first, we have a lot of skilled craftsmen in the great Ming dynasty. So, we will be able to imitate them very soon. At that time, we will be able to sweep the world, ha ha ha. Zhu Qiyu's brain reacted very quickly. At this moment, he seemed to be able to see many advanced firearms at his disposal and the scene of him conquering the world. Yes, this subject understands. Seeing that Zhu Qiyu had agreed, Jining also sighed in relief. Previously, he had agreed to the other party's request for copper and iron without asking the emperor for permission. He was afraid that he would be blamed. Now, it seemed that he didn't need to worry. But then again, in order to obtain an advanced firearm and the friendship of the mercenaries, the price they had paid this time was too great. Just the copper and iron alone was promised to be 1,000,000 tons. This was already 3/5 of the amount in the Great Ming Dynasty's national treasury, and it had been accumulated since the time when they became ancestors. Looking at it this way, the capital they paid was too much. But when he thought about the friendship between the two countries and an advanced firearm, it seemed to be worth it. Immortal abode. The information from the Security Bureau was sent to Yang Chendong. Ha ha ha, very good, it's done. In the study, Yang Chendong's joyful laughter could be heard. There were a lot of science and technology books stored in the warehouse. They were supposed to be distributed to the troops for them to study. Now, Yang Chendong took out a portion of it and gave it to the researchers in Crimson City. Those people were originally 1 in 1,000 talents. Now that they had the materials they could learn from, they could do things with half the effort. The development of the city was changing day by day. With ready-made firearms and detailed books, it was not difficult for him to not improve. The only thing that hindered its development was the lack of raw materials. For this matter, Yang Chendong had even made preparations to attack the Japanese Empire. As everyone knew, the Japanese Empire was located in the middle of the ocean and was made up of several islands. Because of its special geographical location, they had a lot of gold and steel mines. These were the things that Yang Xie needed to develop. However, the Ryukyu kingdom had not been completely stabilized. If he sent troops to the Japanese Empire now, he would feel that he was stretched thin, which was why it had not taken shape yet. In the end, there was too little time, and the number of troops in Yang Xie's army was too small. Since he could not immediately attack the Japanese Empire, Yang Chendong had to reconsider where he could get more copper and iron for Crimson City's development. After thinking about it, his target was still the Great Ming Dynasty. He wondered if he could use Zhu Qiyu's eagerness to make a fuss. Leng Song did not disappoint. After negotiating with Jining, he managed to get 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron. With these things, it could be imagined that the problem of Crimson City's raw materials had been temporarily solved. How could he not be happy? As for whether or not the Great Ming Dynasty would replicate the advanced firearms, Yang Chendong was not too worried. Even with a ready-made firearm, it would take a long time to replicate it. When that time came, who knew what the situation would be like? Who knew? Who knew? Without the corresponding books and guidance of others, who knew how long it would take to create a new firearm just by relying on a finished product? Who knew how many detours there would be? As for what could be done with this advanced firearm, without the corresponding bullets, it was just a decoration and could not threaten anyone. The important thing was that he had obtained 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron. Moreover, Zhu Qiyu had personally agreed to it. Even if it was shipped out of the capital to the sea, it would still be justified. Just as he was thinking about how Jining had helped him greatly, more intelligence from the Security Bureau arrived. It was an intelligence report on the Walla's army. It had to be said that the Walla cavalry was truly an elite force. Not only did they charge quickly, they also fled quickly. It had not been long since the battle in the morning, but their deserters had already retreated 300 li and found the main force of the Walla's army. According to the intelligence report, the Walla's army only had 60,000 soldiers, but it was said to be 200,000. After reorganizing the vanguard that had escaped, they were rapidly marching toward the capital. Of the 50,000 soldiers, there were 40,000 cavalry and 10,000 infantry. It had to be said that the steppe truly was rich in healthy horses. In this aspect, the Great Ming Dynasty could not compare. In the absence of modern chariots, Yang Chendong was also considering building a cavalry team. He had even prepared a candidate. It was a young man named Windchaser. This person had lived on the steppe since he was young and was extremely familiar with horses. Even more amazing was that he even understood horse language and could communicate with healthy horses in an extremely short amount of time. With such talent, he should have been able to do well on the steppe. However, fate played a little joke on him. Because his mother was quite beautiful, the leader of the local tribe took a fancy to her. First, he killed his father, then he took his mother by force, forcing his staunch mother to die on the spot. At the time, Zhuge Feng was only 12 years old. In a fit of rage, he killed the leader and took revenge for his parents. Then, he rode a healthy horse and fled to the Central Plains. After fleeing for 6 years, he coincidentally joined the Yang Xie's new army. A while ago, Zhuge Feng had already passed the strict test of the Cold Front and was approved by the commander, Leng Song, to bring the 9 Cold Front members back to the steppe. He used his status as the squad leader to gather information and secretly accumulate strength. The matter of Zhuge Feng only flashed through his mind. The main force of the Walla was already here. How to deal with them was the problem that Yang Chendong needed to consider. With the death of the vanguard army's Journal King, he was afraid that they would not listen to his orders to set up a formation in front of the city and wait for his roll call. It was very likely that when the city gates opened, they would all rush into the city. If that was the case, it would be difficult to control the situation with just the 400 Cold Front members. Therefore, not letting the enemy enter the city was a prerequisite. Defending the city did not satisfy Yang Chendong. He needed to attack and not passively defend. The great Ming dynasty could not allow the Mongol tribes to bully them. If they could only defend when they were at their doorstep, this was definitely a disgrace. Take the initiative to attack and kill our way out. This thought quickly flashed through Yang Chendong's mind. He got up and went next door. There, Tiger's Mane and the others had already set up a reconstruction sand table based on the information from the Security Bureau. Striding in front of the sand table, Yang Chendong's gaze swept across the table. One plan after another was quickly formed or rejected. Gradually, the battle plan became more and more mature. Walla Army Camp. After attacking for an entire night, it could be said that the men and horses were tired. Most of the soldiers were resting in their tents. However, as the leader, Yes Hen could not sleep. He was holding an impromptu meeting with his generals to consider the upcoming battle with the great Ming dynasty. Participating in the meeting was his other brother, Borimo, the general's grandfather, and other tall Mongol warriors with a valiant aura. Everyone, the news of the Journal King's defeat and death should be known to everyone. What do you think? As the de facto leader of Walla, Yes Hen had a dignified aura. Compared to the great Ming dynasty, the people of Walla acted more rudely and directly. As soon as Yes Hen finished speaking, the general's grandfather took the initiative to stand up and loudly said, "Leader, we have the world's fastest horses and superb riding and archery skills. We only need to rush into the great Ming dynasty's capital. With our warriors, who can stop us?" As for the periodical king being killed, I think he simply wanted to imitate the Han people and hold a meeting before the battle. This gave the other side the opportunity to be attacked by our unknown hidden weapons. It's nothing to worry about. The general's grandfather was a famous warrior in Walla. He was known for his extraordinary strength and superb archery skills. After many military achievements, he was favored by Yes Hen. Naturally, when he spoke, there was no need to worry so much. Yes, we only need to kill with our army. At that time, no matter what the other side has, they will not be able to succeed. Facing Emperor Ingzong's 500,000 troops, we can win. Now, there are only 10,000 enemies. It is not enough to worry about. After the general's grandfather took the lead, the other generals also shouted loudly and expressed their opinions. Chapter 204. These generals were mostly brave warriors. Perhaps they wouldn't have any problems fighting on the battlefield, but when it came to strategizing, they were far too lacking. Yes Hen lightly shook his head. He wasn't as straightforward as the other Mongolians. Instead, he was a cunning Walla leader, as cunning as a rabbit. During the Battle of the Tumu Fortress, it was because of his cautiousness and caution that they were able to achieve a great victory. Since the periodical king had already been defeated and even died, he naturally wouldn't recklessly advance. He wasn't very satisfied with the words of these martial artists. Instead, he turned his gaze to his younger brother, Borromeo. Borromeo and the periodical king were both Yeshen's younger brothers. However, their personalities were completely different. The latter was fond of grandiose achievements and liked to take everything for granted. However, he was a man of few words and usually gave off a gloomy feeling. It wasn't that Borromeo wasn't good at talking. On the contrary, he was a person who planned before taking action. He was used to observing others and then making the most correct decision based on everyone's performance. However, those who were good at observing others generally had very accurate intuition. When he felt Yeshen's gaze on him, his expression became serious. Elder brother, this subject brother also thinks that General Nigong and the others are right. Our current advantage is that we have a strong army. As long as we take a steady approach, taking down the Great Ming's capital will be just around the corner. How do we take a steady approach? Yes Hen, who valued his younger brother's opinion very much, asked. In the words of the Han people, it's called step by step. Obviously, Borromeo had already thought of a countermeasure. When his elder brother asked, he gave the answer without hesitation. Step by step? Yes Hen was very interested in this idea. Tell me in detail. Yes. In fact, the method is very simple. In order to prevent the Great Ming's defeat from happening to us, we can take a divided approach. That is, one army will be at the front, one army in the middle, and one army will be at the back. This way, no matter which army is attacked, we can look after each other and support each other. If we don't encounter any attacks along the way, we will enter the Great Ming Dynasty's capital in batches. Remember, don't learn from the king of magazines. Don't stop, just focus on attacking. If there's really a problem, just turn around and retreat. The army behind you will naturally support you. Not bad, not bad. Yes Hen nodded in agreement when he heard Borromeo's opinion. By dividing the army into 3 groups, it was guaranteed that no matter what went wrong, Walla's main force would still be there, and the army would not be completely wiped out. Yes Hen laughed heartily when he realized the benefits of the art of war. Alright, we'll do as you say. How about this, General Nigong will take 10,000 men as the vanguard, that child Borromeo will take 20,000 men as the center, and this chief will bring up the rear to ensure everyone's safety. Yes. After receiving the order, the generals placed their right hands in front of their chests and saluted Yes Hen. There was a change in the strategy. The Walla army that was supposed to arrive at the capital at dusk on the second day did not arrive as scheduled. On the contrary, the Security Bureau personnel sent out ran until 3 horses died and sent back important news. The Walla army was actually advancing toward the capital in 3 groups. In the mercenary compound, Yang Chendong, Commander Leng Song, and the others were waiting for news from the front lines. This time, the main force of the Walla army was coming. It would be very difficult to use the previous method of naming to deal with them. This time, it would be a hard battle of saber against saber, spear against spear. Emperor Zhu Qiyu had already sent people to inquire about the situation more than once. Even eunuch Ji Ning had taken the initiative to come once. Because of Yang Chendong's presence, he left after a brief exchange of greetings. Leng Song had told him before that it was best not to let the loyalty marquis know about their deal. Otherwise, based on the fact that this person had an extremely good relationship with the leader of the mercenaries, it was very likely that he would interfere and ruin the plan. Of course, this was Yang Chendong's idea. Even his cooperation with Zhu Qiyu had to be as mysterious as possible. In his view, the more mysterious something was, the more people would believe it was real and would not be suspicious. As expected, Jining listened to Leng Song's words. When he saw Yang Chendong here, he took the initiative to leave. Before leaving, he gave Leng Song a look that only the two of them could understand. Yang Chendong had seen this out of the corner of his eye, but he still pretended not to see it. While everyone was waiting, the Security Bureau finally sent back news. When they learned that the Walla army had not gathered together and had instead divided into 3 groups, Yang Chendong wanted to throw his head back and laugh. Previously, he had been worried that the Tile army would launch a collective attack. If that was the case, with the 10,000 Great Ming soldiers under his command and the 400 Cold Vanguard soldiers, it would truly be difficult to ensure the safety of the 12 gates of the capital. As for going out to look for opportunities, the difference in numbers was too great. It was difficult to say whether they could protect themselves and annihilate the enemy. Since he was leading the army into battle, if he only wanted to win, his expectations were too low. What Yang Chendong wanted was a complete victory. He wanted to obtain the greatest victory with the least losses. It was indeed very difficult to achieve this. However, now that the Walla had taken the initiative to divide their forces, the situation was completely different. After dividing their forces, the Walla's advantage in numbers was gone. Yang Chendong could fight according to his plans. He strode to the sand table and looked at the 3-dimensional map that was almost engraved in his mind twice with his bright eyes. He suddenly pointed at a place called Willow Town and said, "It's here. Let's encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements." Encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements? Leng Song and the others were all excited when they heard this. Their eyes flashed. Yang Chendong had once introduced encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements in the tactical learning class. This was an effective method to annihilate the enemy. It would only be used when the enemy's numbers exceeded a certain level. When everyone was still thinking about the essence of encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements, Yang Chendong took a pointer and pointed at the sand table and said, "Everyone look, this place is called Willow Town. The local people call it Willow Ditch. There is only one main road in the town that runs from east to west. The north and south sides are filled with huge ditches. There was a heavy rain a while ago, so there should be a lot of water in the ditches. Immediately send people there. If the ditches in the north and south are filled, immediately inform the people there to evacuate." With a resolute voice, Yang Chendong gave the military order. At the same time, Tiger's Mane had already walked out of the meeting room and arranged for fast horses to investigate the situation in Willow Town. "When the scouts come back with the specific information, we will hold a meeting overnight and then make preparations overnight. We have less than 24 hours to prepare. I hope everyone will be alert." Yang Chendong's gaze swept across Leng Song, Xiaofeng, Tingshan, Wu Sheng, and the others. Yes. Everyone's bodies quickly tensed up and stood at attention. At the same time, their eyes lit up. Generals were never afraid of war. Although they also hoped for world peace, their mission made them never shrink back when war came. In their hearts, they even hoped to achieve great things on the battlefield. The scouts left the city in the night. Now that the 5 city warden departments were under Yang Chendong's command, it was very easy to send people out of the city. 4 hours later, the fast horses came back from Willow Town, which was 30 li away. They reported that the ditches were filled with water, and that the ditches were 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep. Inform Vice Commander Yang Chendong and the 5 commanders to come here for a meeting. Hearing that the situation was as he had expected, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with determination. Not long after the order was given, Yang Guang's group of 6 arrived at the mercenaries' courtyard. This was the first time they had walked in here, so they were a bit nervous. After all, to the outside world, this army was too mysterious. It was so mysterious that even they did not know much about it. The dark night added a bit of mystery to the courtyard. The 6 people followed the torches that led them to the meeting room, so they did not see their surroundings clearly. When they entered the brightly lit meeting room, the 6 people lost their ability to observe their surroundings. All of this was because Yang Chendong, dressed in green, was standing in front of them. Ever since the previous time when he completely defeated Walla's vanguard, Yang Chendong had the title of War God. He enjoyed a very high status and influence in the army. After this matter, Tao Jin, Yang Jia, Mao Fusho, and Gao Li all regretted it. They originally thought that with a war on the horizon, staying in the capital to maintain law and order was a very safe job. If the situation turned bad, they could immediately escape from the capital. But who would have thought that the defeated Great Ming army would be able to display such power in the hands of the loyal Marquis? This was great. They had defeated the enemy effortlessly and obtained military merits, but they didn't get any credit at all. Their hearts were extremely unbalanced, so they made up their minds that they would participate in the next war no matter what. When they saw Yang Chendong, a feeling of respect naturally flowed out from the bottom of their hearts. "You're all here." Looking at Yang Guang's group of 6, Yang Chendong nodded slightly. His gaze then landed on Tao Jin's group of 4 as he asked, "Everyone, the battle is imminent. It's better if you each lead some men to guard the city and maintain law and order." "No, no, no." When Tao Jin's group of 4 heard that they were going to be excluded again, how could they be willing? They immediately shook their heads like a rattle drum, and their faces instantly became very ugly. "Oh? So you're saying that you want to participate in the war?" Yang Chendong asked with a surprised expression. In fact, this result was already within his expectations. Since there were benefits, who would stand by and do nothing? Chapter 205. Yes, we want to join the war. Tao Jin and the other 3 held their chests high, as if they were using their actions to tell Yang Chendong that they were men, and they were also the young generals of the 5 cities' warden's office. Seeing that the 4 of them were so determined, Yang Chendong nodded his head. "Since you want to join the war, Marquis can agree to it. But there is one thing that needs to be emphasized. On the battlefield, no matter who it is, they must obey military orders. If anyone disobeys, they will be punished by military law and beheaded without mercy." Yang Chendong spoke seriously, but Tao Jin and the other 4 were even more serious. They nodded their heads solemnly, indicating that they would listen to Yang Chendong's orders and arrangements. "Since that is the case, come over, I will announce the battle plan." Yang Chendong turned around and walked towards the sand table. He held a pointer in his hand and pointed at the sand table as he spoke of the battle situation and issued orders. According to the scouts, Walla's army is divided into 3 groups and is heading towards the capital. The first group is a vanguard of 10,000 cavalry, led by General Walla's grandfather. Marquis has seriously studied this man. He is a man who is not afraid of death. His personality is straightforward and he kills without blinking an eye on the battlefield. But usually, this kind of person will not beat around the bush. If Marquis did not guess wrongly, he will definitely take the shortest route to the capital tomorrow. Then Willow Town will be his only route. Willow Town, there is only one road from east to west. There are more than 2,000 people and more than 500 families in the town. The south and north of the town are surrounded by 2 ditches that are 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep respectively. It can be said that once we enter the town, as long as we block both ends, there will be no other way out. And what we need to do is to block them here. Tingshan, Tao Jin, Gao Li, where are you? We are here. The 3 people who were called out stepped forward and came in front of Yang Chendong. Marquis ordered that Tao Jin and Gao Li each take 1,000 soldiers. Tingshan, take 100 men from your 3rd company and set up a defense at the exit of Willow Town. Remember, your mission is to block the enemy here and not allow them to advance even an inch. At that time, you may be able to suppress the enemy's charge with long-range shots. Yang Jia, Mao Fusho, each of you will lead 1,000 men and cooperate with Xiao Feng's company of 100 men. When you see Walla's vanguard cavalry enter Willow Gully, you will immediately close the gap. This will restrict a portion of the enemy's forces and reduce the pressure on our allies. At the same time, you must prevent the enemy from breaking out from here. Sun Tong, take 1,000 men and cooperate with 4th Company Commander Wu Sheng. Wait for Walla's main force, which is that child Borromeo's troops, to send reinforcements to Naigong. No matter how fierce the attack is, you must not take a step back. When Xiao Feng, Yang Jie, and Mao Fusho stabilize the situation, they will come to support you. No need, we can handle it. Wu Sheng stepped forward confidently. He looked as if he could complete his mission and didn't need anyone's help. It's good to be confident, but don't feel too much pressure. Also, when you can't hold on any longer, there will be orders for you. At that time, you can retreat to the side and open up a path for that child, Borromeo. Let him enter Willow Gully and become a turtle in a jar just like grandfather. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with Wu Sheng's performance. As a soldier, one must have the spirit of fighting for the sake of thousands of people. Otherwise, one wouldn't be an outstanding soldier. After patting Wu Sheng's shoulder and having him back down, Yang Chendong's gaze fell on Ling Song and Yang Guang, who hadn't been named yet. Your mission is to restrict Walla's leader, Yes Hen. No matter what, you can't let them advance too smoothly. Yes Hen is a very cunning and suspicious person. As long as he senses danger, he naturally won't recklessly advance. Once the time is right, I'll give the order. All you need to do is lead the army and charge over. When that time comes, you'll have done a great service. Yes, Ling Song and Yang Guang confidently replied. They had absolute faith in Yang Chendong. Since this was his order, it naturally couldn't be wrong. Okay, the order has been given. Is there anyone else who doesn't understand? If there isn't, immediately return to the armory and get a strong bow. Remember, other than cavalry, don't even think about engaging in close combat with the enemy. Just attack from afar. After assigning all the tasks, Yang Chendong calmly waved his hand. Although his blood was boiling at this moment, as a commander, he still needed to maintain his cool. This sort of performance would play a vital role in calming the soldiers. With this order, the army immediately began to get busy. What should have been a peaceful night in the capital was now bustling with activity. The army needed to prepare for battle and leave the city. Such an important matter had to be reported to the emperor and approved. Yang Chendong gave this task to Sun Tong. Marquis Yang, this general really didn't do it on purpose. When eunuch Jin sent someone to find me, I truly had no other choice. Sun Tong saw that Yang Chendong had given him this task and hurriedly tried to explain. He did not want to offend Yang Chendong because of this, as this would only bring him benefits. It's fine. Marquis knows of your difficulties and can understand. There's no need to think too much about it. Yang Chendong had a smile on his face, but it was just a formal smile. No one knew what he was thinking behind this smile. No, Marquis Yang, this general truly admires you. I have already regretted what I did before. This time, please send someone else. Sun Tong kept shaking his head, as if he wanted to express his determination. Yang Chendong stepped forward and placed a hand on Sun Tong's shoulder as he chuckled. Okay, Marquis understands your intentions. How about this? You still need to report. This time, it is Marquis who has asked you to go. It will be different from last time. This smile was much more sincere than before, and Sun Tong immediately nodded in understanding. Although one did not have a very high position in the 5 cities warden's office, one still needed to be smooth and slick in dealing with people, and one also needed to be smart. Satisfied, Sun Tong left and headed straight for the imperial palace. Not long after, Jining heard the news and met with Sun Tong. She heard about Yang Chendong's plans and determination for this battle. Is the main force of Walla's army coming? Commander Sun, what do you think are our chances of winning this time? Jining did not know much about the battlefield. He did not even know where Willow Town was. However, he was better than Wang Zhen in that he would not casually interfere in things he did not know. For example, when it came to military matters, he did not understand, so he would ask for the opinions of others. I am not very sure either, but looking at the Marquis of Loyalty, he should be very confident. At this moment, we should choose to believe in him. Sun Tong did not dare to directly express his admiration for Yang Chendong, so he changed the way he spoke. Yes, we should believe in him. How about this? I will immediately report this matter to the Emperor. You wait for the tiger tally. Jining nodded and told Sun Tong to wait where he was. He then went to the back of the palace to find the Emperor. It had to be said that Zhu Qiyu was very diligent. He had not yet slept and was still reading some books that the Emperor must read. When Jining went forward and said that Yang Chendong was going to lead the army out of the city to fight Walla, his expression became somewhat nervous. Has Walla's main force arrived so soon? I wonder if the Marquis of Loyalty has made preparations. Your Majesty, with the help of the mercenaries, I think there will be no problem. Commander Sun Tong of the Warden's Office of the 5 Cities has come to ask for your opinion and ask for the Tiger Tally to lead the army out of the city. Your Majesty, what do you think? Jining asked carefully. The political power of the Ming Dynasty was actually composed of civil and military officials, eunuchs, and the embroidered uniform guards. According to the rules of the past, when the army went out to war, there must be an accompanying eunuch to supervise the army. Only then would the emperor be at ease. However, this obviously did not work for Yang Chendong. Last time, he had refused to accompany the emperor, and the emperor had also agreed. If they were to send an eunuch this time, would the other party think too much? However, if there were no eunuchs accompanying him, if he handed over the tiger tally so easily, the emperor would not even have the strength to fight back once he had other thoughts. What are you looking at? Since the Marquis of Loyalty is going to deal with Walla's army, just give him the tiger tally. Don't worry, Yang Chendong is the youngest son of Lord Yang Rong. He won't do anything to me. Zhu Qiyu clearly saw Jin Ying's worry. However, he had his own plans. In his opinion, Yang Chendong was a little unique in his way of doing things, but he should not have any thoughts about the throne. Otherwise, when he saved Yingzong, he could have held the emperor hostage and ordered his vassals. However, he did not do so. Now, he would not do something like rebelling. Since the emperor had said so, Jining could only nod and agree. However, for safety's sake, he still said, Your Majesty, why don't I personally go and see how the Marquis of Loyalty is preparing? Is there anything I can help with? That's good. Then you can go. Zhu Qiyu thought that sending Jining was a form of attaching importance to him, so he nodded and agreed. Following Sun Tong, Jining arrived at the courtyard where the mercenaries were stationed. When he saw Ling Song here, he merely nodded as a greeting. This was what the two of them had discussed before. In front of Yang Chendong, they would try their best to pretend that they were not familiar with each other to confuse him. How could he know that this was just Yang Chendong's idea? He wanted to give Jining hope and let him feel that he had a chance. This way, the mercenaries and himself would be safe and they would be able to reap more benefits. Marquis of Loyalty, is the army going to fight Walla? After entering the meeting room, Jining asked knowingly. That's right. It has already been arranged. We're just waiting for Your Majesty's tiger tally. Yang Chendong nodded and directly asked for the tiger tally. He had no intention of explaining the battle plan to Jining. Chapter 206. It was one thing for Yang Chendong to not have eunuchs as supervisors when he led troops into battle, but he couldn't even be bothered to explain the battle plan. This made Jin Ying's expression turn ugly. Duke of Loyalty, how are we going to deal with the Walla this time? Do you have a chance of winning? Jin Ying kept asking for the battle plan. Although it was no longer a secret, Jin Ying had the right to know. If he knew, it was the same as the emperor knowing. But Yang Chendong couldn't be bothered to waste words with him. He still remembered that before he returned, it was this man who had ordered the brocade guards to attack Yangjia village. Yang Chendong didn't settle the score with him because he cared about the big picture. But it didn't mean that he would still speak nicely with him. Thus, in front of Yang Guang, Sun Tong, and the others, he turned around and said, "This marquis has spoken for an entire night, and my mouth is already dry. If Eunuch Jin wants to know the specific situation, you can ask someone else." Yang Guang, Sun Tong, and the others' expressions changed when they saw him reject Jin Ying in front of everyone. This was the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, the favorite of the emperor. Wasn't Yang Chendong afraid that Jin Ying would hold a grudge against him and settle the score later? Tao Jin and the others couldn't help but lower their heads, indicating that they wanted to draw a clear line with Yang Chendong. Yang Guang stood unmoving. Sun Tong looked conflicted and hesitant. But in the end, he raised his head and looked at Jin Ying's deflated expression. Yang Chendong took in everyone's expressions out of the corner of his eye. Then, his gaze landed on Jin Ying. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. His smile was playful. At this moment, Jin Ying was furious. Ever since Zhu Qiyu had come to power, no one had dared to speak to him like this. Even the current emperor would talk to him in a negotiating tone when he encountered something. However, Yang Chendong actually dared to openly oppose him. This was simply challenging his authority. Jin Ying was furious, but on the surface, she did not show any signs of anger. Instead, she laughed and said, "Fine. Since the emperor has handed over military power to the Marquis of Loyalty, there should not be any problems. In that case, this duke will congratulate the army in advance on their triumphant return. This is the tiger tally. This duke still has to go back and report to His Majesty, so I won't stay any longer. Farewell." After saying that, Jin Ying turned around and left. No matter how one looked at it, her footsteps were somewhat unsteady. It was clear that she was extremely angry. But at the same time, he still had a backup plan in his heart, which was that he did not know the details of the battle plan. If they lost the battle, it would have nothing to do with him. At that time, he could use this as an excuse to punish Yang Chendong. What Jin Ying didn't know was that Yang Chendong would give her this opportunity. Because of Yang Chendong's attitude towards Jin Ying, the atmosphere in the meeting room was extremely tense. Yang Chendong acted as if he didn't see it and said, "All right, go do whatever you need to do. The tiger tally has already arrived. The army will set off in an hour." Yang Guang, Sun Tong, and the others quickly left. They needed to collect their weapons. It would take some time to gather their men. Leng Song and the others all stayed behind. Each of them only brought a company of soldiers, so they could be called to battle at any time. Without any outsiders, everyone's spirits were much more relaxed. Leng Song also carefully came to Yang Chendong's side and said, "Young master, Jin Ying is quite angry with you, but I don't know why she did this. Didn't you say that the group of eunuchs could always influence the great Ming Emperor's thoughts?" This was not only Leng Song's confusion, but also everyone's confusion. Even Tiger's Mane, who had been by Yang Chendong's side all this time, had a puzzled expression. These days, the sixth young master had been polite to everyone. Why did he suddenly turn hostile tonight? Seeing everyone's confusion, Yang Chendong laughed loudly and said, "You don't have to worry about the young master's safety. With you all here, who would dare to touch this young master? As for tonight's actions, they were originally intentional. I wanted to show my dislike for Jin Ying and let the world know that this young master doesn't like the group of eunuchs." "Why is that?" everyone asked again in confusion. The people's hearts. Yang Chendong pondered for a moment and didn't answer immediately. Instead, he paused for a moment before spitting out these two words. Ever since the defeat of the Tumu fortress, everyone knew that the eunuchs had ruined the great Ming dynasty's plans. They had caused so many soldiers to die tragically on the battlefield, and so many officials to die without even leaving behind their corpses. This caused the common people and some officials to hate the eunuchs to the bone. Yang Chendong didn't give Jining any face and did it in front of so many people. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before this matter spread out. Even if these people didn't say anything, they would use the security bureau to spread the news. In this way, everyone would know that the loyal marquis wasn't afraid of the eunuchs. This was tantamount to giving everyone a glimmer of hope. Letting those people who hated the eunuchs to the bone find a leader would allow him to win the hearts of the army and the people in a very short period of time. These might not be of much use in the political struggles of the upper echelons. But once it was time to explode, it would definitely be a force that couldn't be underestimated. Yang Chendong's goal was to replace the great Ming dynasty peacefully. The hearts of the army and the people were the most important issues to be resolved. As for the officials and eunuchs, as long as they were given enough benefits, they wouldn't be a problem. This was the true reason why Yang Chendong didn't give Jining any face. In the end, he was setting up a trap. It was just that he had set it up too early, so others couldn't see its effects. He only mentioned the people's hearts and didn't give any further explanation. Yang Chendong looked at Leng Song and the others and said, "This battle concerns the safety of the great Ming dynasty's capital and the image of this young master. Do you have the confidence to win this battle?" "Yes." Leng Song and the others stood at attention, their faces full of confidence as they replied. "Very good. Since that's the case, you can go and make your preparations. Leng Song, stay behind." Yang Chendong waved his hand at everyone. Xiao Feng, Teng Shan, Wu Sheng, and the others quickly left to mobilize the people before the battle. Leng Song, who was left behind, looked at his young master expectantly. "Let's go. The two of us will leave the city first. There are some things that need to be arranged in advance." Looking at Leng Song, Yang Chendong smiled confidently. He wouldn't tell others that he had a large warehouse. He could take out many heavy weapons at any time. Thus, he left Leng Song alone to make arrangements for this matter. The old man had an impatient personality. Ever since he received the order from Yes Hen, he had been rushing toward the great Ming dynasty's capital without stopping. In just one day, he had arrived at Willow Town, which was 30 li away from the capital. "General, we've been hurrying along the way. Both men and horses are tired. Should we rest here for the night first? When the sun rises tomorrow morning, we'll go straight to the great Ming dynasty's capital?" A trusted aide looked at the lit villages and towns in front of him and suggested. The grandfather shook his head and arrogantly said, "There's no need. Let's rest in the town first, and then we'll launch a night assault on the capital. We'll catch the enemy by surprise." Ha ha ha, the merit will definitely go to this general. Since he had taken the role of the vanguard, he naturally had to make achievements. Otherwise, wouldn't he be ridiculed by others? As for the success rate of the night attack on the great Ming dynasty's capital, he didn't consider it at all. In the battle of the Tumu fortress, what he saw was the scene of the defeated army of the great Ming dynasty being killed and captured in groups. At this moment, he didn't put the strength of the great Ming dynasty's army in his eyes at all. In order to reach the great Ming dynasty's capital as soon as possible, the old man entered Willow Town as Yang Chendong expected. If it were other generals, in order to reduce unnecessary trouble, when they encountered an enemy town, they might be able to take a detour and not directly attack. But because of the Battle of Tumu Fortress, the Walla cavalry had long been arrogant. They didn't even put the elite army of the great Ming dynasty in their eyes, so how could they take the ordinary people of a town seriously? On the contrary, when they entered the town, they could burn, kill, and loot. How exciting and satisfying was that? However, when they really entered Willow Town, the situation was beyond their expectations. Although every house in the whole village was lit, they couldn't see a single person. When they broke in, they didn't find the existence of a living person, not even a chicken, duck, or goose. When the old man who received the report of the battle heard that this was an uninhabited town, he sneered and said, "I didn't expect the great Ming Dynasty to play the scorched earth game with us. It's just that their calculations are wrong. We didn't consume too much on the way here. Even if we can't replenish for a while, it doesn't matter. Humph. It's just that this method is really annoying. Come, inform everyone to eat some dry food here. After half an hour, the army will set off." General Nai Gong didn't take the empty town in front of him seriously. This was a complete display of his arrogance. If it were any other general who was on guard, they would probably think carefully about why such a thing would happen. At least, they wouldn't rest so comfortably in this town. Of course, General Nai Gong was also a brave general who had led troops for many years. During the rest time, he didn't forget to send scouts to the front to inquire about information. But he didn't know that the scouts he sent out were destined to not return. They had completed their mission of going to the underworld to inquire about information. Nai Gong's army stopped in Willow Town and didn't leave. This gave Xiaofeng, Yang Jie, and Mao Fusho enough time to prepare. Seeing that the enemy had entered the encirclement, the 2,100 people quickly set up a defensive line on the west side of Willow Town. Each of them drew their bows and prepared to block the enemy's retreat. While Xiaofeng and the others were still preparing, at the east exit of Willow Town, Tingshan had already begun his journey to harvest lives. Chapter 207. Xiaofeng, Tao Jin, Gao Li, and the other 2,100 soldiers were the first to enter the battlefield. With sufficient time, they even dug a simple trench for the soldiers to hide in. Just as they finished everything, the sky began to darken. Not long after, the sounds of people chattering could be heard in the distance. This was the sound of Walla's vanguard troops entering Willow Town. The enemy was right in front of them. In an instant, the 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office became very nervous. Some of the soldiers who were participating in a battle for the first time had their palms sweating profusely to express the anxiety in their hearts. This was how they should behave when they were on the battlefield for the first time. For some people, even if it was their second time on the battlefield, they would still be nervous. However, after 100 battles, they would no longer be nervous when they saw the battlefield. Instead, they would be excited. In contrast, the 100 soldiers led by Tingshan were very calm. They first used sharp military shovels to dig a hole in the ground to ensure that they could hide their bodies well. Then, they set up the 95 style in their hands and aimed the crosshairs at the only exit from Willow Town that led to the capital. None of the 100 or so people spoke, nor did they make any extra noise. They gave off the feeling of ghosts in the night. Other than a faint shadow, nothing else could be seen. The lifelessness of the Lengfeng soldiers shocked the surrounding 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office. Among them, there were some people who were quite skilled and thought that they were great. However, when they compared themselves, they realized that the gap between them and the soldiers was huge. Not long after the soldiers finished their preparations, 3 warhorses rushed out of the town and headed straight for the formation they had set up. From the looks of it, they were all lightly dressed. There was no doubt that they were scouts. Position 1, Position 2, Position 3, get ready to fire. Positions 4, 5, 6, and 6, prepare to fire at any time. Seeing the 3 enemy scouts charging towards his formation, Tingshan Company commander, who was leading the formation, only took a glance before losing interest. There were only 3 people and they were not even enough to fill the gaps between the teeth. He could just hand them over to 3 soldiers. The 3 people who were named immediately became excited. This was a kind of glory, but at the same time, it was also a kind of test. Didn't you see that Company Commander Tingshan had arranged for other people to take the last shot at any time? If he really missed, he would lose face and the limelight would be stolen by others. If that happened, he wouldn't even be able to find a place to cry. The 3 soldiers closed their right eyes and aimed at the 3 moving targets with their left eyes. Their breathing gradually stabilized, and their right index fingers gently placed on the trigger, preparing for shooting. Fight! When he estimated that the 3 enemy scouts were only 150 steps away from him, Tingshan softly spat out a word. Then, 3 gunshots were heard. Bang! 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 On the opposite side, 3 Walla scouts fell off their horses at the same time. F***CK. When the 3 of them fell off their horses, the warriors in positions 4, 5 and 6 cursed at the same time. This had nothing to do with quality. It was all because they didn't have the chance to shoot. It was just another kind of complaint. Looking at the warriors in positions 1, 2 and 3, they were all in high spirits. They almost laughed out loud when they saw that they had hit the target. At the same time, the soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty who were with them all widened their eyes in disbelief at this moment. The scene just now deeply stimulated them. They couldn't believe that a battle could be fought like this. From a distance of 150 steps in the dark, they could still accurately hit the enemy. What kind of method was this? Thinking about how they could fight side by side with such an army, the officials of the 5 cities' warden's office began to feel confident. Originally, they thought that it would be very difficult or even impossible to stop the enemy's cavalry of 10,000 with only 2,000 soldiers. As for the 100 mercenaries, they didn't take them seriously at all. What could such a small number of people do? However, when the truth was in front of them, they knew that they were wrong, very wrong. They were afraid that the combat power of these 100 mercenaries would not be much worse than the 2,000 of them. The 3 gunshots sounded so ear-piercing in the quiet night. Walla's army in Willow Town quickly moved. The general in charge of the town immediately shouted to his trusted aide, "It seems to be the sound of firearms. Go and see what happened." Although he suspected that it was the sound of firearms, the arrogant general still didn't think that the Great Ming army would have the courage to come out of the city and fight with him. They had received intelligence that although many of the nearby Great Ming Dynasty guards were sending reinforcements to the capital, distant water couldn't quench the immediate thirst. There were only 10,000 soldiers in the capital, and most of them were second-rate soldiers. They were very easy to deal with. Such an army wouldn't have the courage to come out of the city and provoke him. However, thinking was one thing, and reality was another. Not long after the general sent people to patrol the situation, another round of gunshots sounded. Then, in the small courtyard where he was resting, a trusted aide ran over with a nervous expression. "General, we found a large number of Great Ming army outside the town. They used firearms and strong bows to kill dozens of our warriors." The trusted aide fell in front of the general and said in a panic. "What? Great Ming army?" When he heard that there were Great Ming army here, Walla was stunned for a moment. Then, he laughed heartily, very good, very good. This general thought that he would only start a massacre when he entered the capital. I didn't expect that he would deliver himself to my doorstep so quickly. Very good, pass down the order. Warriors, get on your horses and charge with this general. It was just firearms and strong bows. The general really didn't put them in his eyes. Not to mention that accuracy was not good in the dark of the night. Even if it was daytime, he had 10,000 cavalry. Why would he fear the Great Ming army? Whether it was firearms or strong bows, there was a limit to how far they could shoot. There was also a time difference when controlling them. With this, the Walla cavalry could charge forward. As long as they charged into the enemy's camp, it would be time for them to start a massacre and rampage on the battlefield. The general was very confident. Not only that, his Walla cavalry didn't take the great Ming army in front of them seriously. Along the way, they had seen too many useless great Ming soldiers. There was no one who could scare them. As expected of the elite cavalry, they quickly gathered together. However, because the road to the east of Willow Town was not wide, it was not suitable for a large number of cavalry to charge forward. Thus, the general personally picked 500 cavalry and let them be the vanguard of the vanguard to charge forward. No matter how much damage they suffered, they had to charge to the enemy's formation and create enough time for the rear troops to charge forward. The 500 cavalry obeyed the order and left. Like a gust of wind, they charged out of Willow Town and headed straight for the Great Ming Army camp. At this moment, Teng Shan and the soldiers of the 3rd Company were looking forward with bright eyes. They were ready to fire at any time. Beside them, the 2,000 Great Ming soldiers led by Tao Jin and Gao Li also pulled their bows and were ready to shoot at any time. After shooting down the first 3 Vol scouts, the enemy had launched another wave of attacks. More than 30 of them had been wiped out by the mercenaries from afar. Although the Ming army had released some arrows during this period of time, they all knew that it was just to scare people. None of the Wat's cavalry had been killed by the arrows. After being robbed twice in a row, Tao Jin and the others also wanted to perform well this time. Thus, they gave the order early on. As long as the enemy cavalry entered the range of the shooting range, they did not need to wait for orders and could shoot arrows to kill the enemy. In the dark night, they were waiting with a net. At this moment, the air was filled with a kind of solidification factor, causing everyone's breathing to become heavier. The originally cold night was filled with a warm atmosphere. Within their sight, they could hear the sound of horse hooves coming from afar. Because there were too many cavalry, the ground was trembling because of it, causing every soldier's face to be filled with a dignified aura. They're coming out. In the hope and expectation, a large number of strong horses rushed out of Willow Town. There were also bursts of shouts and shouts. Those were the Walla warriors riding their horses. They wanted to rush forward at the fastest speed and kill the Great Ming army. Prepare to shoot. The moment they saw the cavalry rush out of the town, Teng Shan, who was leading the team, gave the order to the soldiers of the 3rd Company. The distance of 500 steps was far beyond the effective range of the Type 95, which was 600 to 800 meters. If he gave the order to shoot now, it would be difficult for the bullets to hurt the enemy. However, this did not prevent him from giving the order to shoot. As long as the soldiers felt that they could kill the enemy, they could deal with it themselves. Every soldier carried a basic magazine, 300 bullets, to ensure that when fighting the Walla cavalry, the enemy would not be able to break through the defense line because of the lack of ammunition. Commander Teng Shan gave the order, and the momentum of the 100 soldiers of the cold vanguard suddenly changed. A powerful murderous aura spread out from their bodies. In the end, it formed a substantial cold air, causing the Great Ming soldiers who were closer to them to feel a burst of coldness. Ayo, yo, ho. The Walla cavalry made a charging sound that belonged to their race. Under the command of their masters, the strong horses quickly closed the distance between the two sides. 350 steps. 300 steps. 250 steps. They had already reached the effective range of the Type 95, but the soldiers of the 3rd Company did not shoot. It was obvious that their usual training was effective. Due to the lack of raw materials such as copper and iron in the arsenal of Crimson City, when the instructor taught the cold vanguard soldiers, the most common sentence was to save ammunition and try to shoot every bullet into the enemy's chest instead of shooting randomly. Chapter 208. Even though Ling Feng had brought enough ammo this time, he didn't want to waste any bullets. He gripped his gun tightly and stared ahead like an eagle, thinking about the best time to fire. 230 steps, 220 steps, 200 steps. When they reached 200 paces, which was the effective distance of 300 meters, the sound of gunfire suddenly became louder. In the dark night, it was as if a meteor shower had streaked across the sky, directly pouring down on the bodies of the Walla cavalry that was surging forward. Under the dazzling light of the fire, the Walla cavalry, who seemed to have seen hope, experienced what it meant to be in hell, and experienced what it meant to have nothing to live for, to have no hope in life. When the powerful bullets spun out of the barrel and drilled into their bodies in less than half a breath, many of the Walla cavalry were killed on their horses before they could even understand what was happening. Perhaps because the charging speed was too fast, many of the cavalrymen were already dead, but their bodies were still charging forward. Only after 2 or 3 breaths did they fall off their horses with a plop. Even when they died, they probably didn't understand what had killed them. The 100 cold vanguard soldiers followed what they had learned in their training, firing in a staggered formation. It was as if they had set up a net of fire, wiping out all of the Walla cavalry within the range of 200 to 150 steps. In short, other than the war horses, none of the Walla cavalry could get within 150 steps. This distance of 150 steps became an insurmountable barrier in front of the Walla cavalry. Behind the 100 Walla cavalry were Tao Jin and Gao Li's 2 soldiers from the 5 cities' warden's office. Originally, they thought that this would be a tragic battle, and some of the soldiers were already prepared to die for a righteous cause. But when they saw the Walla cavalry's sudden burst of power and the situation stabilized, they knew that this was not a battle, but a massacre. That's right, a massacre. Not a single one of the cavalrymen was able to get within 150 paces. At such a distance, even if they wanted to shoot arrows, they wouldn't be able to reach the effective range and wouldn't be able to do any damage. The Walla cavalry's crossbows could not shoot over, and the 2,000 soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty could not shoot either. This scene caused Tao Jin and Gao Li's hearts to burn with anxiety. They were here to gain merit, not to be spectators. They wanted to kill the enemy, but the distance that a strong bow could shoot was limited. Even if they shot from such a long distance, they would still lose their accuracy. There was no difference between shooting and not shooting. Commanders, if you really don't have anything else to do, just bring some people to bring back Walla's healthy horses. These are all good things. Whether it's offered to the imperial court or sold to merchants, they are all military merits and silver. Teng Shan noticed the anxious mood of the 2 Great Ming Dynasty commanders behind him, so he gave them a suggestion. The strong horses were in front. Without their owners, more and more of them gathered and began to hinder the Walla cavalry's shooting targets. If these strong horses could be moved away, it could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Tao Jin and Gao Li, who were originally worried that they had nothing to do, immediately smiled. Okay, we will immediately organize people to steal the horses. Oh no. It's to pick up the horses, hee. Since there was military merit and money to be obtained, and there was not much danger to their lives, why wouldn't they do such a good thing? At this moment, under the command of the 2 commanders, groups of Great Ming soldiers rushed forward under the moonlight and brought the tall and strong horses back to their camp. They also cleared the obstacles in front of the Walla cavalry to ensure that they could have a clear line of sight. At the same time, there were no obstacles after the bullets were shot, so they could better kill the Walla cavalry. In Willow Town, 1,000 Walla cavalry were sent out, but not a single one returned. Another 1,000 Walla cavalry rushed out, but only less than 200 people escaped. The results that were sent back made General Nai Gong turn pale with fright. He couldn't understand when the firearms of the Great Ming Dynasty became so powerful that they could also play a role in sealing off the night. It was not that they had never dealt with the firearms of the Great Ming Dynasty before. In the past, when Zhu Di was still alive, he took them to the grasslands to commit crimes. In the beginning, they were indeed intimidated by the firearms that could emit smoke and shoot iron bullets. But after many bloody battles, they also found out the shortcomings of the firearms. That was, they could only shoot 1 shot at a time. After that, it would take a long time to reload. When it was used again, the accuracy was extremely poor. It was far better to use a strong bow. Over time, such things no longer scared the Walla people. Only they dared to risk their lives and sacrifice themselves. They could break through the firearms of the great Ming dynasty by paying a small price. After that, they could do whatever they wanted. How could it be like this time? 2 echelons of 2,000 people rushed out, but only 1/10 of them returned. What the hell is going on? Who can give me an explanation? Seeing that they had lost nearly 1/5 of their forces without killing a single enemy, General Naigong angrily roared at his subordinates. All the Walla generals lowered their originally arrogant heads deeply. They also couldn't figure out what was going on. They couldn't understand why the great Ming army, which was originally weak, became so powerful that they suffered such a big loss. No one answered his question. General Naigong's emotions couldn't be vented. He was even angrier. Just as he was about to use the saddle to teach these disappointing subordinates a lesson, suddenly, a burst of gunshots came from the west side of Willow Town. It was like many firecrackers were set off. What's going on? The sudden sound scared General Naigong. He looked at the burst of fire coming from the west side of the town and asked angrily. Just as the words left his mouth, a young general quickly ran in front of General Naigong and knelt on the ground. General, a large number of Great Ming soldiers suddenly rushed in behind us. We were careless for a moment and more than 500 people were killed or injured. This was a Walla Chiliarch who was in charge of covering the rear. Usually, his task was the simplest and safest. He was only responsible for checking if there were any soldiers who escaped because of the battle. But today, they were suddenly attacked. They were completely unprepared and were caught off guard. Half of the soldiers died on the spot. The rest reacted faster and escaped into the town. General Naigong was in a fit of anger. When he heard the Kiliarcha's words, he stretched out his right hand and grabbed the Kiliarcha's collar and pulled it in front of his face. What did you say? The Great Ming army attacked us from behind? How many people are there? I can't see clearly. It's too dark. The Chiliarch shook his head with an innocent expression. He couldn't be blamed for answering like this. It was really too dark. In addition, he was unprepared. When the gunshots rang out, a large number of his brothers fell to the ground. He only cared about running for his life. How could he have the time to see how many enemies were there? The Kiliarcha's answer made General Naigong throw him to the ground angrily. Then, he shouted to the other troops, "Who dares to lead the troops to the back and see what happened?" General Naigong in Willow Town was stunned. He originally thought that he was the one who took the initiative to attack. But reality told him that the Great Ming army was prepared. Now that he was the one who was attacked, how could he not be angry? Among the young generals, there was a brave Chiliarch who took the initiative to lead his troops to the west side of Willow Town. But when cold weapons faced the 9.5 spear that had a shooting range of nearly 400 steps, the result was obvious. After leaving behind a few hundred corpses, the slow ones all retreated. At this point, an unbelievable result was placed in front of everyone. General Naigong's troops were surrounded in Willow Town, which was not very big. East side of town. Teng Shan looked at the gunshots and flames coming from the west side of town. He was furious. Xiao Feng, UF** King Bastard. It was no wonder that Teng Shan was so angry. According to the previous plan, only when they were facing the crazy attacks of the Walla cavalry would they send out a red signal to the sky. At that time, Xiao Feng's first company would poke the Walla cavalry from the back to distract them. At the same time, they would also reduce the pressure on their side. But now, Xiao Feng did not even wait for his signal. He directly poked the Walla vanguard from the back. How could Teng Shan not be angry? He was not satisfied with the fight yet. But the reality was already like this. Even if he was angry, there was nothing he could do. Teng Shan could only look at the east side of Willow Town, hoping that there would be more Walla cavalry who were not afraid of death. Maybe it was because the heavens knew the hope in his heart. A large number of cavalry rushed out from the east side of town, and there were still many of them. Using the shadows under the moonlight, a rough calculation showed that there were at least more Walla cavalry than the last time. Very good. This grandfather is to my liking. He knows what the battalion commander likes and wants to die. Brothers of the 3rd Company, listen up. Check your guns and ammo. Make preparations before shooting. Seeing that the enemy did not show any intention of retreating because of Xiao Feng's actions, Teng Shan changed his frowning expression and laughed out loud. The 3rd Company's cold vanguard members were originally angry because Xiao Feng's 1st Company didn't keep their promise. However, when they suddenly saw that the enemy still charged out, all of their faces lit up with joy. They quickly checked the 95 shots and replaced it with a new magazine. Why did the Walla army still rush out when they knew that the Ming army was blocking them from the east side? This had a lot to do with their commander, General Naigong. Knowing that they were surrounded, General Naigong was not afraid. He knew that the Ming army only had about 10,000 people. He originally thought that they were waiting for him at the east side. If he wanted to rush over, it would be difficult. But the Ming army actually took the initiative to split into two. Wasn't this the same as splitting their limited forces? Even so, how many enemies could there be in the front? If he did not rush now, when would he? When he broke through the front line, wouldn't the capital of the great Ming dynasty be an undefended empty city? Wouldn't he be able to take it? Chapter 209. Naigong thought that he had seen through the weakness of the Ming army. Thus, he gathered 3,000 cavalrymen and had them charge out from the front. 3,000 Walla cavalrymen surged forward. From afar, they looked intimidating. At the very least, the Ming army led by Tao Jin and Gao Li trembled in fear. However, Teng Shan, who did not care about all this, had the opposite expression. His eyes were wide open as he looked forward. He waited for the enemy to enter the predetermined distance before he started shooting. Without needing anyone to give the order, all the Leng Feng soldiers started firing when they estimated that the enemy cavalry had entered their effective shooting range. Similarly, a dense net of fire enveloped the front. The cold vanguard soldiers guarding the center even switched their guns to burst mode. Often, a small group of cavalry would fall to the ground together with their horses after a burst of bullets. Naturally, this method of fighting could not kill one person with one shot. However, it had an absolute deterrent effect and disrupted the charging formation of the enemy cavalry. Under the dense gunfire, at least 1,000 Walla cavalrymen were killed in the charging path. However, this also bought them a distance of more than 100 steps. Just as they were getting closer and closer to the Leng Feng soldiers and were less than 40 steps away, grenades rained down on them like rain. Then, a series of deafening sounds rang out. Following that, people shouted and horses neighed non-stop. A series of powerful grenades were thrown and completely shattered the enemy's fighting spirit. At the same time, countless people died. Those who were still alive immediately retreated. They no longer had the courage to charge. Phew! Tao Jin and Gao Li let out a long sigh. It had to be said that their performance just now was a little too weak. When they saw the enemy rushing in front of them, they actually forgot that they were still holding strong bows in their hands and could only watch helplessly as the enemy got closer and closer. Their legs began to go soft and their bodies began to tremble. It could be imagined that if the Leng Feng soldiers were not the main force in this battle, these 2,000 Ming soldiers would have been defeated. If they were not captured, they would have been killed. It could be said that these Ming soldiers had not received proper training for too long. They had forgotten what the battlefield was like. They had forgotten that a life-and-death battle relied on courage. Fortunately, the Leng Feng made a move at the crucial moment. He used the powerful grenades to destroy the enemy's morale and won another victory. Another attack had failed. The old man in the town was not discouraged. Instead, he patted his head as if he had suddenly realized something. It's all my fault. It turns out that the Ming army's main force is right in front. It seems like their weak point is behind us. Come on, gather the rest of the troops and charge out with me. After knowing that it was impossible to attack from the front, Nai Gong immediately changed his strategy and decided to leave the town from the west. He thought that he was very adaptable, but in fact, he was just adding fuel to the fire. However, as the person in the game, Lai Gong had no idea. With the order, the remaining 6,000 Walla cavalrymen quickly gathered. However, because the path out of the city was not wide enough, only 1,000 cavalrymen could charge out at a time. As the leading general, Nai Gong took the initiative to stand in the third echelon, which was the third group to charge out. In Nai Gong's eyes, standing here was undoubtedly very safe. Once the first two factions had used up all their firearms, it would be time for him to go on a killing spree and show off his might. However, would that really be the case? Xiao Feng, along with Yang Jia and Mao Fushou's 2,000 Ming soldiers, was destined to teach Nai Gong a lesson. Everyone, be careful. In a moment, the Walla cavalry might charge out from the west. At that time, we will attack when they are 300 steps away. Before that, I hope that Commander Yang and Commander Mao can play your roles. Lie in ambush on the two sides and shoot from afar. Don't worry about whether you can hit the enemy or not. Just shoot with the fastest speed and immediately retreat. Do you understand? Xiao Feng looked at the two commanders of the Ming army and used an unquestionable tone to give the order. Although they were not affiliated with each other, Yang Jia and Mao Fushou had seen how Xiao Feng had led the Cold Front Company into Willow Town and killed hundreds of Walla cavalry. In the army, the strong were always respected. With the scene just now, Xiao Feng's words naturally had more credibility. Furthermore, he was not asking them to go up and die. Why would they not agree? At that moment, the two of them expressed their agreement and quickly began to make preparations. They had made arrangements in advance. Just as the 2,000 Ming army went to the west of Willow Town, a large number of Walla army appeared. Release the arrows, release the arrows. After releasing the arrows, immediately retreat. When Yang Jia and Mao Fushou saw that the Walla cavalry had charged into the range of the bows, they loudly gave the order. Immediately, arrows rained down from the sky and landed on the Walla cavalry that was charging out of the town. The dense barrage of arrows rained down, and hundreds of Walla cavalry were shot down. They fell from their horses, causing waves of chaos. However, even more cavalry charged out and headed straight for Xiao Feng, who was guarding the front. Attack! Xiao Feng, who was also holding the 95 style, had an excited expression on his face. He was the first to raise his gun and shoot, hitting a Walla cavalry that was charging over with a sword. This was like a signal that instantly pulled the attention of all the Cold Front Company soldiers. At that moment, hundreds of guns were fired at the same time. Bullets flew out from the muzzles and flew towards the charging enemy and the warhorses that were relatively larger in size. Ha ha ha. Do you see, the Ming army here is indeed few in number. Follow me and charge. When he saw that the bows were flying all over the sky, but in reality, they were not very accurate and their accuracy was greatly reduced, the leading Wei Gong thought that he had seen through the Ming army. He was immediately overjoyed and urged the army to quickly move forward. Just as the order was given, the second echelon of 1,000 Walla cavalry charged out, and there was a burst of firecrackers in front of them. From afar, they could not see the situation in front of them clearly. They could only see streaks of fire that were like meteors flashing by. It was because they could not see the situation in front of them that the Walla cavalry at the back continued to charge forward, one after another, towards hell. The sound of the gunshots traveled very far. Around 15 li behind Wei Gong, they could faintly see the scene of red light flashing in the distance. Luckily, this was a plain. If there was a forest in the way, it would be difficult to see the scene in the distance. The Ming army actually came out of the city to fight? Looking at the red sky in front of him, Borromeo quickly made a judgment and guessed that Wei Gong had encountered the Ming army. Based on the time that they set off, he did not think that Wei Gong would be able to reach the capital so quickly. Thus, there could only be one conclusion, and that was that the Ming army took the initiative to come out of the city. They wanted to catch them off guard. In the art of war, there was the saying of taking the enemy by surprise. However, the Walla were mostly cavalry. In a battle on a plain, their advantage was too great. The Ming army did not know this, so it was no wonder that they were defeated. Men, send down the order to speed up and gather with Wei Gong's troops as soon as possible. In order to not let Wei Gong take all the credit, Borromeo, who had always been cautious, was careless for once. This was naturally because the sky was dark, so no one could see what was happening in front of them. However, it was also because of Ing Zong and Shi Heng's repeated defeats, which caused the Walla to be arrogant and think that the Ming army could not withstand a single blow. Under the order, the 20,000 Walla cavalry increased their speed. In a few moments, they had traveled 10 li. When they reached here, they could faintly hear the dense gunshots in front of them. "They're here, they're here." When battalion commander Wu Sheng and his 4-company brothers saw the Walla cavalry approaching from afar, they immediately became excited. Previously, they were worried that the Walla's main force would shrink back because of the unclear situation in front of them. Now, it seemed that there was no need to worry. The excitement of Wu Sheng and Ling Feng was seen by Sun Tong and Ming Jun, who were accompanying them. They were very confused. They couldn't understand. At most, there were only 1,100 people. How could they be so excited and happy when facing 20,000 enemies? Did these people not want to live anymore? Or were they too arrogant and did not put others in their eyes? Under the astonished gazes, Wu Sheng and Ling Feng quickly checked the black firearms in their hands. Then, they formed a small semicircle and crawled on both sides of the road to Willow Town. 100 against 20,000, Wu Sheng would not be so arrogant as to fight hand-to-hand with the enemy. They adopted the battle strategy that Yang Chendong taught them. That strategy was to retreat when the enemy advanced, harass when the enemy was stationary, attack when the enemy was tired, and advance when the enemy retreated. In the process of the Walla army's advance, they would give the enemy the most effective damage. At the same time, the enemy would be annoyed and unable to do anything to them. The soldiers of 4th Company were divided into 3 groups by platoon. The first platoon was personally led by Wu Sheng. There were a total of 4 platoons, and they were also the strongest. They were responsible for blocking the Walla cavalry's advance. The second platoon was on the left, and the third platoon was on the right. They were responsible for blocking the advance of the Walla cavalry. Wu Sheng had just given the 3 platoon leaders their tasks when Sun Tong hurriedly walked over. "Company Commander Wu, what can we do? You are responsible for following my platoon. Retreat as you fight on the road. Create a false impression that we are no match for the Walla cavalry. This will make them bolder and chase after us. That will be a great achievement." Wu Sheng roughly explained the battle plan that he and young master Yang Chendong had arranged. When Sun Chuanchu heard this military order, he was stunned at first. Then, he understood what it meant and said, "Company Commander Wu means that we should pretend to run away?" "Yes, something like that." "Why? Is there a problem, Commander Sun?" Wu Sheng thought that this understanding was not wrong. However, one kind of defeat was intentional, and the other was genuine. He just did not know how the 1,000 Ming soldiers would perform. Chapter 210. No problem. Hearing that they were just pretending to run away, Sun Tong nodded firmly. If he had to lead 1,000 soldiers to fight against the 20,000 elite Walla cavalry, it would be impossible. But when it came to running away, there was no need to disguise anything. Everyone knew what to do, right? In fact, it was exactly so. When the 20,000 Walla cavalrymen appeared and displayed their majestic and powerful side, the 1,000 Ming soldiers actually displayed their inability to run away vividly and vividly. Before Wu Sheng and Sun Tong even gave any orders, the 1,000 Ming soldiers began to collapse. This was not an act, but a genuine fear in their hearts. In the end, what they showed was exactly what Wu Sheng had predicted. It was even more realistic than what he had imagined. And for such an outcome to occur, it didn't seem to be as simple as acting. Instead, he really did run away because he was afraid. The Ming soldiers in front of them were defeated before they even made contact. When the Walla cavalry saw this scene, they burst into laughter. Then, they charged forward without any fear. It looked like they wanted to beat the enemy when they were down. The Walla cavalry, who wanted to fight for glory, rushed out with more than 1,000 men. This was exactly what Wu Sheng wanted. He was only leading a company and had limited military strength. In this situation, if the enemy had too many soldiers, he could only retreat in order to ensure that he did not suffer any casualties. But if the enemy only had 1,000 men, he was confident that he could defeat them. Use flag signals to give orders to the 2nd and 3rd platoons. Let them fight according to the previous plan. The first row of warriors will wait for the enemy cavalry to enter our shooting range. Let's kill them. There's no need to hold back. Wu Sheng looked at the dust on the road opposite him and saw more and more enemy cavalry approaching him. He then gave the order to the cold vanguard soldiers. They could not wait, especially when they heard the gunfire behind them. The morale of the cold vanguard soldiers was high. They finally had a chance to perform well in front of the 6th young master. Of course, they did not want to miss this opportunity. As time passed, Wu Sheng's 4th company, brimming with battle intent, finally came into close contact with Walla's 1,000 cavalrymen. When the distance between the two sides was less than 200 steps, and those with good eyesight could even see the shadows of the other side, Wu Sheng decisively gave the order to open fire. For a moment, the 40-man team of Cold Vanguard spat out tongues of flame from their firearms. At this time, there was no need to aim at all. He only needed to rely on his intuition to shoot at the black shadow in the distance. As the gunshots continued to ring out, sparks streaked across the sky like meteors. One by one, the cavalrymen fell from their horses. Many of them did not understand what had happened even until they died. 80 to 90% of the Walla cavalry in the first 3 rows were wiped out, which allowed the Walla cavalry behind to see the situation in front of them clearly. When a Walla Chiliarch saw that they had lost 20 to 30% of their troops, his eyes widened in anger and he shouted angrily, "Everyone, don't be afraid. This is the Ming army's firearms camp. As long as we can charge in, it's time to show off. Kill." After 200 to 300 of their men were killed, the Vara cavalry did not retreat. Instead, they charged forward, shouting their unique Mongolian language and chant. It was clear that they wanted to use the advantage of the speed of their horses to charge into the Ming army. Then, they would start a massacre. The Walla cavalry was very fast and charged forward like a whirlwind. In the dark night, it gave people the feeling that dark clouds were pressing down on the city. If they were facing the Ming army this time, even if the Ming army was several times more powerful than them, they would still have a chance of winning. They would even be able to beat the Ming army until they covered their heads and ran away. Unfortunately, they were facing the Yang Xie's new Cold Vanguard army, which was 100 times more powerful than them. Facing an enemy that was dozens of times more powerful than them, they were not afraid at all. Instead, they were excited. Raising the 95 style in his hand, Commander Wu Sheng shouted, "Attack!" Not only on the official road, but on both sides of the official road, tongues of fire also sprayed out, completely surrounding the Wuxia cavalry from afar in a fan-shaped formation. Bang bang bang, under the sounds of gunfire, the pitiful Wuxia cavalry were like paddy fields swept by a hurricane. Plop 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 plop, they fell to the ground one by one. From afar, the sounds of men and horses being overturned could be heard. The cold vanguard never knew what it meant to be soft when facing enemies. They may have a soft side, but that side was only for their family and friends, as well as the young master Yang Chendong that they were loyal to. As for other people, they were no different from animals. Hundreds of tongues of fire were fired, and only 1,000 Wuxia cavalry corpses were left on the official road. This vanguard army finally paid with their lives for their arrogance. When the child General Borromeo arrived with a large group of men, all he saw was a ground full of corpses and the stench of blood in the air. Report. The Ming army is retreating. There are about 1,000 of them, and they are less than 5 miles away from us. The elite Wuxia army scouts quickly determined the situation of the Ming army from the traces on the ground and reported it to General Borromeo. When he heard that 1,000 of his elite warriors were killed by 1,000 Ming soldiers, Borromeo's eyes flashed with intense anger. He had a vicious side to him, and people like him were the most vengeful. Since someone had slapped him, if he did not catch the culprit and punish him 100 or 1,000 times, he would not let it go. Order the army to advance. We must catch up to the Ming army, and then, kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. In his anger, Borromeo gave out the order to kill. When the Jianghu under him heard this, they immediately got on their horses and galloped forward. The Wuxia cavalry was determined to kill the Ming army that was 5 miles away. It was as if a vicious wolf had set its eyes on a sheep, opening its bloody mouth. However, it seemed that their teeth were not sharp. Facing the retreating Cold Front 4th Company, not only did they not manage to swallow their prey as they had expected, they even broke a few teeth along the way. It was a great loss. After a few charges, they were beaten back a few times. After losing another 1,000 cavalry, the Wuxia cavalry had advanced more than 10 miles and was now 5 miles away from Willow Town. At this time, Wu Xing's 4th Company had already met up with Xiao Feng's 1st Company. The soldiers of the two companies were naturally in high spirits. Tonight's battle could be said to be extremely satisfying. Everyone had obtained a lot of gains. Compared to them, the Ming army was far worse. Especially Sun Pe and the 1,000 Ming soldiers that followed the 4th Company. They carried out their mission very well, running and running all the way, acting very well. No. It should be said that without the 4th Company at the back, they would have already collapsed, or rather, they would have already collapsed. After retreating 5 miles to the west of Willow Town, the 4th Company and the 1st Company met up, and they had more than 3,000 Ming soldiers. However, this strength was not enough to stop the charging Ming army. Borromeo's troops. In other words, the plan did not have any intention of stopping them. Instead, the Ming army started to retreat like the tide, leaving a path to Willow Town. Willow Town. Wuxia's vanguard general, Nai Gong, ordered his warriors to charge forward and back a few times. After losing soldiers, they finally knew the power of the Ming army that surrounded them. The original 10,000 people quickly became less than 4,000 people. They finally became well-behaved and did not struggle. Instead, they went from attacking to defending, preparing to wait for reinforcements to arrive. Without waiting for too long, Borromeo's troops entered Willow Town from the west. The moment he entered the town, he saw injured vanguard warriors everywhere. Borromeo was in disbelief. Was this still the vanguard army that did not put the heroes of the world in their eyes? This was exactly the same as the great Ming army that was defeated in the Tumu incident. Finally seeing Borromeo, Nai Gong, a 7-foot man, was so emotional that he almost cried. With a plop, he half knelt in front of Borromeo, praising the strength of the Ming army and his failure to break out of the encirclement. Nai Gong was a fierce general, and he rarely put other people in his eyes. Even though Borromeo was Yeshen's younger brother like the dead Sai Yen Wang, he still did not put them in his eyes. For him to half-kneel in front of Borromeo, one could imagine how big of a blow he had suffered, to the point where he could even give up half of his dignity. Is the Ming army really that powerful? After hearing his grandfather's description, Borromeo had a bad feeling in his heart. Along the way, he had fought with the Ming army. Along the way, he had advanced triumphantly and had not seen much resistance. However, when he thought about how only his own warriors had died along the way and not a single Ming army corpse, Borromeo felt that something was not right. However, he could not put his finger on it. Logically speaking, with his current military strength, even if the Ming army wanted to play some tricks, what did he have to fear? Not to mention that he had met up with Nai Gong's troops. Facing the encirclement of 10,000 Ming soldiers, what could they do to him? In the end, it all depended on strength. Without enough strength, even if you use tactics well, what could you do? Since when can seeing a sheep kill a wolf? Borromeo did not know. It was true that the Ming army was a sheep, but there was also a tiger working with them. Although it was only a cub, when it opened its mouth and bared its fangs, it was still very frightening. It could also swallow an adult wolf. Chapter 211. Report. We suddenly discovered a large number of Ming soldiers at the west side of the town. They are blocking our way back. A Walla scout ran to Borromeo and knelt on the ground, reporting everything he saw. Borromeo was still trying to figure out what was wrong when he heard the scout's report. His eyes lit up, and he quickly figured out all the problems. But then, his face was filled with disbelief. According to his thoughts, the Ming army wanted to surround him and Nai Gong's troops and then eat them all. But the report said that the army only had 10,000 people. Did they have the ability to do this? What was going on? Even if the report was wrong and the Ming army came to the capital, how could the Ming army, who had just suffered 2 defeats at the hands of Tumu and Shihang, have such courage? Borromeo thought and decided to go to the west side of the town to take a look. General Nai Gong also had a face of disbelief as he followed behind Borromeo to the west side of Willow Town. 50 li away from Willow Town, Walla's rear army was resting under the command of their leader, Yeshen. In front of them were the 2 armies he sent out. This night, Yeshen slept exceptionally well. After seeing the Ming army's main force destroyed, he didn't think that there was anyone who could threaten him. But what Yeshen didn't know was that at this moment, 800 steps away from his tent, Yang Chendong had already arrived. He stood on an inconspicuous small hill and used a night vision telescope to look down at everything in his camp. The layout of the camp is somewhat loose on the outside but tight on the inside. Yang Chendong slowly lowered the binoculars in front of his eyes. A gentle and confident smile appeared on his face. "Young master, should we inform them to move?" The tall Beta Persei, who was more than 8 feet tall, asked in a heavy voice. "Yes, use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move, hee. Yang Chendong nodded lightly. Now, everything was going according to his plan. This made him feel like he was in control of the world. In fact, for this operation, Yang Chendong did pay a lot. At least, he took out a lot of good things from the warehouse. On the surface, the warehouse was a large military warehouse for the country. Not only were there some advanced weapons produced in the country, but there were also some weapons that were ready to be deployed. There were also some cutting-edge weapons that were collected from all over the world for self-research purposes. And now, all of this was under Yang Chendong's control. This time, in order to effectively attack the Walla's army and achieve his goal, he specially mobilized the FGT-203mm towed artillery from the warehouse. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was the largest caliber field artillery developed by China. It was developed by the Northern Industrial Company. This system was mainly used by military-level combat units. It had a long range, great power, and high accuracy. It could be equipped with a variety of special ammunition. It was the backbone of long-range firepower. Although the artillery was dismounted, its range exceeded that of the same type of artillery in the United States and Russia, and it was given the title of Asia's first artillery. The FGT 203 mm towed artillery was very cumbersome, and its mobility was not as good as other artillery. In addition, it was easy to expose the target, and it was slow to retreat after being attacked. It was precisely because of these shortcomings that its development was eventually stopped. There was an FGT 203 mm towed cannon in the warehouse, and it was displayed as an antique. This time, Yang Chendong took it out. In addition to wanting to review the power of this cannon, he also relied on the fact that the warehouse only needed to place the cannon in one place, and there was no need for it to be moved. Also, this artillery had an effective range of 50 kilometers, and its lethality was very large. It was perfect for him to use in this battle. The FGT 203 mm towed artillery was taken out and placed in a hidden place. Yang Chendong didn't forget to bring Hu Mang and Leng Song's first platoon of the second company to the artillery. When they found the artillery, these experienced Leng Feng soldiers widened their eyes. The FGT 203 mm towed artillery was very powerful. It could hurt both enemies and oneself. Once such a heavy firearm appeared, Yang Chendong had always been very careful. He brought his most trusted subordinate, Tiger's Mane, with him so that he could be in charge of using the artillery. After handing the FGT 203 mm towed artillery to Tiger's Mane, he did some simple operations and told the other cold front soldiers how to fire the artillery. He also told them in detail the exact location of the artillery. After that, Yang Chendong left a long-range radio communicator and arrived outside the Walla army camp. Looking at the sleeping enemy in front of him, he felt that it was time to wake them up. Use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move now. Let's hope he can hit more accurately, Yang Chendong said as he led the cold front soldiers and 2nd platoon and 3rd platoon of 2nd company to retreat. After all, this was a cannon. There was a chance of accidental damage. If they were killed by their own artillery before they could hit the enemy, there would be no way to explain themselves. Beta Persei clumsily used the radio to contact Tiger's Mane. After telling him the 6th young master's intention, Tiger's Mane, who was in a mountain valley about 30 kilometers away, gave the order to fire the artillery with a serious expression. There were 2 FGT 203 mm towed cannons in total. Under Tiger Light's command, Leng Feng's brothers, who had systematically and seriously studied artillery knowledge, began to operate the cannons in an orderly manner. They weren't very familiar with it. After the necessary procedures were carefully carried out, a golden artillery shell that could only be carried by an adult was sent into the barrel. Under Tiger's Mane's order, one of the FGT 203 mm towed artillery cannons that had its coordinates adjusted by Yang Chendong let out a roar. After a sudden tremble, flames whizzed out of the muzzle and flew straight into the Walla army camp about 30 kilometers away. Most of the Walla soldiers were immersed in their dreams. This time, they had gained a lot of benefits. Many of the soldiers' faces were filled with satisfied smiles. But all of this was interrupted by a deafening sound. Boom! A roar like a small earthquake sounded, and then the artillery shell landed in the Walla army camp, producing a huge flame that spread out from the center. The shrapnel of the bomb was like countless meteorites flying in the sky, piercing through one tent after another, producing bursts of wailing and howling. Not far away, Beta Persei and the others looked at the mushroom-like flames. Although they were prepared, they were still stunned. But soon, this shock turned into worship, and their eyes fell on Yang Chendong, who was standing in the middle of them. At this time, Yang Chendong was smiling. He was happy that he hadn't forgotten about his work. The artillery shell was still very accurate. This was also thanks to the fact that in his previous life, the country found more than a dozen artillery experts to train him for a month to complete a mission. At that time, he was so busy that he didn't even have time to sleep. Looking at the results now, he felt that everything was worth it. Inform Tiger's mane, adjust the target to the left and right, and fire the second shell. Since the coordinates were prepared, Yang Chendong had nothing to be afraid of. He continued to give orders to Beta Persei, asking him to use the radio communicator to inform Tiger's mane 30 miles away. At this moment, the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Even the soldiers who were usually sleeping were awakened by the loud noise. Some of them, wearing simple pajamas, rushed out of their tents and looked at the mess in front of them. From time to time, they would rub their eyes to make sure that this was not a dream, but reality. Just when everyone was still in a daze and wondering what was going on, the second shell fell as scheduled. The landing point was 50 steps to the left of the first shell. With another loud noise, some unlucky soldiers stood in the area of the bombardment. At that moment, they successfully fulfilled their childhood dream and flew into the sky. But this was just a flash in the pan. Soon, they fell to the ground under the influence of gravity. However, when he landed on the ground, there was not the slightest sign of life. The artillery fire in the dark night was dazzling and eye-catching. Yang Chendong and the others were enjoying everything in front of them as if they were watching fireworks. In contrast, the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Leader Yeshen had already been awakened. He was wearing a cloak, and under the protection of the soldiers, he looked blankly at the balls of fire one after another. His lips were trembling, and he seemed to be mumbling something at the moment. Yeshen was indeed stunned by the scene in front of him. He had never seen or even dared to imagine a scene so real in front of him, making him feel like he was in a dream. However, the cries of the soldiers were so real, and the smell of blood was so thick. The cruel reality was telling him that everything was so real, and there was not the slightest hint of falsehood in it. "Leader, let's leave this place quickly. It's too dangerous here." A trusted aide watched as the flames that could devour lives fell around them from time to time. He was afraid that the next moment, it would threaten the safety of his master. Thus, he hurriedly reminded his master of the situation. "Wait, it stopped, it stopped." Just as he instinctively wanted to nod his head and abandon the warriors who supported him, everything suddenly became quiet again. Although there were still fires burning and the screams of the soldiers were incessant, there was no more gunfire. The danger seemed to have gone away. You're tuning into the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.